And we are now live for the CCSD59 Board of Education meeting on June 8th. I will hand it over to Janice Krinsky, the board president.
Welcome to the District 59 Board of Education meeting on Monday, June 8th, 2020. I would like to remind everyone that we are following a virtual meeting format as is in accordance with the governor's executive order, which allows for these types of meetings. And we look forward to a time when we can actually have a meeting in person. But until then, this will be the way we continue to conduct our meetings. Thank you. Now, the first item is a call to order.
Roll call.
Yes, please.
Krinsky.
Present.
Garlowitz.
Present.
Lang. Mancia.
Present.
Petrielli present. Reed.
Present.
And Schumacher.
I'm present.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We're going to go right to comments and suggestions from the public. And I am going to read several of the comments, but Dr. Fessler, why don't you play the voicemail that came in first?
Working on it.
You might need to refresh that page, yeah.
Students earn the grades they receive. I didn't give an A if they didn't earn it. I didn't pass them if their work was an F. To reward per work or performance makes the attainment of a reward grade meaningless. Art Fessler should not receive a favorable evaluation. He should not be given an increase in his $292,000 plus salary or an increase in benefits. You should not extend his contract. Since Art Fessler has been in office in 2013, our scores are low and have continued to decline for Parks, PISA, and PSAT 8. Both our low income and non-low income kids are not doing well. Not because we're not a test prep district, because our kids don't know the content and don't have the skills to apply that content. I don't think you can be successful in life and understand the world around you without certain content knowledge. He had the chance to improve the curriculum and he did not. In terms of finances, he has not managed that well. Errors on the comprehensive annual financial report, a document online for the public to see. Asking for an increase in taxes several times because he could not balance the budget. Using the money from the old ad buildings to help balance the budget. What kind of administrator sells an asset of the district and then uses it for the budget? Not informing all board members that the buildings in our district need repairs when ARCON prepared the report. Building a beautiful ad building and then asking for an increase in taxes. The buck stops with the superintendent on all matters of finances and academics. It's not his money, it's ours. For this reason, don't give him a raise or an extension. I'm going to go a step further. He ought to be removed now. Cut our losses, remove him now. If we really care about our kids in our 59 communities, he should not be allowed to do more damage than he's already done. Do the right thing. We are watching. Thank you.
Okay, back to you, Janice, if you want to go ahead and read the email public comments that were sent today.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, because my video is unstable and I had to turn it off. My apologies. We have a new router and it's not working well. So here's a comment from Mrs. Judith Cox. It's time to reboot. We can no longer try to add to, adapt, or tweak or revise a broken curriculum. The switch to online learning has exposed the weaknesses and ineffectiveness of the 21st century learning introduced some 7 years ago. Just as you need to restart your computer when a program becomes impossible to work with, the district needs to start anew. Adding a limited math program, iReady, and adopting a one-year science STEM program will help, but our students have been without core programs for too long. Even the reading program, which the district developed and supported for 6 years, needs a drastic revision. When the reading program was written, it was designed to service our general ed students. It did not transfer effectively to our bilingual students. Aspects of reading and writing in Spanish versus reading and writing in English conflict. And while our bilingual teachers have done an excellent job of working with the materials they have, they need more support materials and direction in teaching. What was an effective bilingual program before 2013 is now a patchwork of lessons, translations, programs, and syllabi of instructions that is constantly changing. In lieu of the COVID pandemic, teaching and learning will have to be different. Small group, teacher-directed lessons will have to be limited. The district needs to return to use some form of explicit teaching. This doesn't mean a return to boring lectures, but it does mean a return to the teacher modeling, the teacher working with the students, and finally, the students working independently. When you learn to walk, you usually hold someone's hand to start. I would like to commend our teachers who are teaching in the midst of these uncertain times. I've heard parent after parent tell me they are amazed and impressed with how the teachers have adapted to the new teaching. The board needs to support these teachers. Listen to them again and ask them what they need. Ask them what the administration can provide to make teaching more effective. Ask the teachers what the students and their parents, caregivers need. It is including $7.7 million of interest charges benefiting Raymond James and Associates to the detriment of both the students and taxpayers of District 59. The fund balance decrease combined with the new bonded indebtedness means that since Dr. Fessler has been superintendent, the district has allocated approximately $87 million of spending over and above the regular tax levies for those 7 years. Much of this is directly the result of the superintendent's 2016 budget statement regarding philosophical changes in the area of instructional strategies, programming, and right staffing. Where did all the money go? Some of it is as obvious as this overbuilt administration building without a commissary or the interest payments listed above. Other reasons are less obvious. Just this year, the district paid a vendor thousands of dollars for a useless strategic plan, which was heavy on inspirational language. But when it came to District 59's 4 goals, the plan repeatedly mumbled a feeble work to be completed with stakeholders. Why couldn't the administration formulate its own plan? The district just paid the first annual fee of $90,000 for the iReady math program, a program without instructional content. It's primarily just more data collection. Spending money would not be so problematic if every November taxpayer didn't have to sit through 2 hours of board meeting where the administration tries to make lemonade out of the lemons found in the alphabet soup of student growth reports. F&P, IAR, ISA, AMath, EMath, all looking at growth and achievement. Don't alarm bells go off when growth is in the 68th percentile, while achievement is in the 20th and 30th percentile. When a philosophical change without content is useless. The crowning blow was delivered last October when the Illinois report card for our schools showed that not a single District 59 school could achieve even a 50% score for the ready for the next level standard. The 7-year experiment is over. The superintendent's philosophical changes, which may work somewhere else, are not working here. He should be replaced. Okay, the next comment is from Karen Davidson. And she writes, my name is Karen Davidson and my son is about to start 8th grade at Holmes. Most of you know I've been actively involved in curriculum reform for the past 3 years and am part of the parent curriculum committee. My involvement in this began with a tip-off a few years ago that my son was unlikely to be prepared for the rigors of high school science at Rolling Meadows High School if things didn't change. My son is an advanced student and I have had to fight to keep him challenged pretty much all the way through. I began to research what the issues were and discovered they are numerous. Today, I want to talk about the lack of focus on academic achievement within District 59. We've all likely seen the story of Daniel Salgado Alvarez, the D59 then Elk Grove High School graduate who was Harvard bound, despite having to overcome many hardships. This is an amazing accomplishment and one we should be striving to be the outcome for all of our English language learners and low-income students. However, the way 59 has been run the past 4 to 5 years puts barriers in the way of that happening rather than breaking them down. The 59 that Daniel attended was a very different district with a different curriculum, one that valued academic achievement and encouraged kids to strive to do their best. Sadly, that is no longer the case. From a curriculum that is designed using a discovery-based learning model, proven to be the most difficult way to teach English language learners, to an administration who puts academic achievement at the bottom of their priorities, the cards are stacked against our kids. We have heard directly from Rolling Meadows and Prospect High School that our kids start 9th grade behind kids from other feeder districts. This isn't as evident in Elk Grove High School, where 97% of the students come from D59. Yet Elk Grove High School is the only school the administration ever looks at. The concept of systemic racism is especially salient right now. Unfortunately, I think our current curriculum and structure contribute to that. From policies on not giving homework because the low-income students won't do it anyway, that was a quote unquote, to learning experiences with irrelevant and culturally insensitive examples, to a lack of diversity in our advanced classes, to failing to support our bilingual students in math and science in junior high. We are not providing opportunities for all of our students to succeed. Behavior problems have increased significantly, especially in junior high. Research suggests, and some teachers agree, that this is directly related to the lack of accountability for academics. The kids know they will pass no matter how poorly they do, and there is no motivation for them to do better. There are few consequences for missing work, no measurable goals for academic achievement, and no accountability. The new strategic plan promised to set these goals, but we have seen no metrics or specific plans to achieve them. Many members of the community have gotten up over the past few years and talked about state test scores. And time and again, we've been told that test scores aren't the end all be all. And I'll agree with you, they shouldn't be, but we've had this new curriculum in place for 3 to 4 years now, and there is still no other data to look at. Common assessments were just rolled out this year and still don't really measure actual achievement or mastery of skills. There is still no consistency across grade levels at the various schools. This was made particularly evident during remote learning. I understand there is some out-of-the-box thinking about how to utilize skill sets of various teachers across grade levels if we're remote next year, and I applaud that. But I am also aware that there are almost no teachers involved in the planning for next year, and to me, that is a huge problem. Everyone has to work together to make these new models work. In conclusion, I strongly encourage the new board members to dig deep and see for yourselves what is really happening. It may sound good on paper, but the reality is often very different. And finally, from Dan Mikowski, he sent me the following. As the 2019-2020 academic year has drawn to a close, it's time to reflect on what has been accomplished by the superintendent as leader of this school district. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 virus, the academic year did not end as it typically does. The annual state assessment for students was not taken. We can look to prior years as a representation of what has occurred since Art Vessler started as superintendent of the school district. For 2019, once again, the district scored below the state's proficiency score on the Illinois State Assessment Tests. According to the Illinois State Board of Education website for English Language Arts, the district scored 31% proficient compared to the state score of 38%. For math, the district scored 21% proficient compared to the state score of 32%. This issue is systemic throughout the district. Both low and non-low income students score below the state average. The issue is not a lack of revenue. 2018 data shows that the district's instructional costs were $8,879 per student compared to the state average of $8,172 per student. During the last board meeting, issues with the e-learning platform on Chromebooks was mentioned, and the issue of teachers not having tablet devices like those used by students. This is after being approximately 2/3 into the school year. Wouldn't remote learning be better if textbook material was actually loaded onto the Chromebooks? The district has an abundance of administrators and coaches, but lacks an established curriculum for students to learn what is required. Only within the past year has a core curriculum for math and science been looked at after years were wasted on the district writing its own curriculum and teachers speaking up. Also, after years of failing to budget regular building maintenance, the board approved issuing at least $35 million in bonds for this purpose. This is on top of the bonds that were issued for the Early Learning Center, whose payments have not been completed. With 1 year remaining in the superintendent's contract, the board should seriously consider not renewing the superintendent's contract, end his contract now, pay his last year of salary due, and starting the search for a new superintendent. And that concludes all the statements I received. I will just check my email once more to make sure nothing has come in since we started the meeting. And seeing none, we are going to move on to the next item, which are presentations. So we're going right into the second semester. Oh, it says second semester focus area review. It's supposed to be fourth quarter.
Thank you, Janice. Let me allow this thing to load real quick.
Sure.
So we've been sharing this with board members for the last several weeks. There is a significant amount of content here. The idea was to allow you time to dig in, read the information, and learn about some of the things that we've done over the course of the second semester. This focus area update connects directly to our strategic plan. We will be closing out the old strategic plan and beginning to transition to the new strategic plan a little later in the meeting when we talk about reentry planning. We'll also include some updates connected to next steps for setting focus area goals for next year and board discussion and how that process works. So with that, Tom is going to work through this presentation with SLT. We're going to look primarily at the 4 focus areas. So those first several slides is what we'll focus our comments on. And then we want to provide enough time for discussion. So it is not our intent to go into the last 15 or 20 slides, which are more informational slides, just sharing non-priority area focus work that we've done. So as we go through these first 4 areas, any questions that you have, we want to take the opportunity to discuss and to respond. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tom.
Thank you, Dr. Flessler. If you could jump back to slide 2, I think that's where we, thank you. So this is just the organizational piece. And as Dr. Flessler mentioned, we'll really focus on those top 2 bullets, the instructional practice and curriculum enhancements connected to math and language acquisition, and then the system instruction and enhancements connected to intervention and assessment. Next slide, please. So again, those are those pieces. Our thinking is we'll just walk through each slide, share a couple comments, and then take questions with each. So with the next slide, we'll jump into math. And Maureen McAbee, I think, will jump in.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to just highlight a few of the elements of the math slide. And specifically, as we are about to close, as a closure was impending, we had training scheduled for our staff on the new math resources that had been selected. The iReady digital program, it's an assessment and instructional program that is digital for K-5, as well as the Number Corner numeracy supplement that was purchased. Obviously that could not happen, and all of our efforts shifted to supporting remote learning. But then we did come back to that, I think, and really right now we are in the final steps of dates for summer professional development for our staff for both iReady and Number Corner. I will also share that our K-2 team, when we thought the rest of the school year was going to go as planned, they felt that they wanted the K-2 staff to be trained first in Number Corner, and then iReady as a follow-up. After surveying the pilot committee again during the closure period, they have shifted their thinking right now and feel like the iReady is the more pressing need because it is a resource that can help us, number one, diagnose student gaps and needs, and also provide an adaptive path for those. And also it can kind of span the realm of remote learning and in-person learning. And given the uncertainties of the fall, that they felt like that was the more pressing need. So our focus will be on primarily that iReady training for K-5 in the summer, but we will still offer the Number Corner training as well. But our primary focus will be make sure that all K-5 teachers have the sufficient training for iReady for the fall. The other piece I want to mention too, which came up pretty much in the past several weeks, but in a conversation about looking at resources for next year, given the uncertainties, our junior high teams and teachers are also interested in pursuing potentially a pilot of iReady so that we would have that same resource K-8 for math. So that would allow the junior high math teachers to do the same type of diagnostic assessment, allow the junior high students to have access to those customized instructional learning paths that are part of iReady, as well as the suite of formative assessments that they have that are standards-based. So they're standards mastery assessments. So we've been doing a lot of conversations with iReady in the past couple of weeks, probably 2 to 3 meetings a week, just with their leadership team to make sure that we are ready to go and have those tools and professional development ready. We also have, I think you might have seen in there, we do have an additional core resource for math that we are ready to use for next year. It supplements our scope and sequence, it supplements our learning targets, and provides that ready access for teachers for differentiated learning activities, assessments, tools that they might need. So we have, that will be also part of the professional development for teachers this summer, how to access that, what it looks like, how that couples with the anchoring application tasks that we really want to maintain for our students, with our learning targets that we have for our students. So really focusing on how to put those pieces together. So we feel like with this plan, we have the pieces that we need for really strong tools and resources for math, along with a strong instructional approach that recognizes that come fall, we will need to diagnose our students where they're at and have a plan for providing that instruction.
So again, during this portion, board members, any questions that you have, we'd absolutely like to respond to your questions.
I was wondering if you could address how you're going about setting up the startup plan and identifying the gaps with the various students.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's what we're really kind of in the deep stages of looking at right now. We know that assessment is going to be very, very important come fall. Given the closure, even more important. It always is important in the fall, but even more so given the closure. So I think right now we are waiting to hear, are we going to be able to be in person at all or fully remote? Fully remote assessment is very challenging. If we're counting on families and devices and internet at home, even just the conditions for assessment could be very challenging. Our hope would be that our plan could include, even if we are at a hybrid approach of a little bit of in-person and some remote, can we arrange to bring students in small groups to still do that face-to-face assessment of some sort. We don't want their first experience with their new grade to be, here's an assessment, but we know that, and even the state has been encouraging, that assessment data is going to be very important. We want to know, really help our teachers have the data to plan instruction appropriately. iReady is a tool that provides an enhanced level, more sophisticated level of diagnostics in terms of telling teachers in a very visually friendly, color-coded way, here are the needs of your students. Here are the students that they use color-coded system with each of the skills, the major skills of each grade level. So if possible, that's going to really be our hope, that we can build our plan to bring students in, even if it's not all students, to do some of those assessments.
Maureen, can I ask you, logistically, that's going to be a nightmare, but how did we end the year as far as evaluation of the students where they ended the year? How did we do that?
So really at the end of the year, the last final grading period of the year was really more about participation in e-learning or remote learning than evaluating the work done. We really didn't have a way of discerning very clearly who was participating via paper-based instructional activities versus digital instructional activities. So we were very strongly cautioned against, doing any harm to students who might not have been able to participate fully. So teachers really just were able, it was more of an anecdotal and feedback system versus clearly noting where they were. Students submitting a piece of work, a teacher could grade it. It doesn't really tell the teacher, like, what were the missing skills? What were the gaps? Why did the child get this error? So it really was very challenging to do any specific assessment of their work in remote learning.
Maureen, can you talk more about the guidance? So these weren't like local district decisions. They were collaborative decisions with our teachers union and our leadership, and then also based on the guidance. So the guidance indicated that any grades given could not have a negative impact, as Maureen said. So if they were getting a B at the end of the third quarter, regardless of what they would do moving forward, they could not get less than a B. On the other hand, though, the guidance did say that students who were struggling or had lower grades could improve their grades if you could work out a structure. So in collaboration with the DEA, we worked through an approach for trying to work on expansions and extension of things that we were doing in our current student work with our students. And again, that was following the close guidance of the state. I do believe that'll look very different in terms of the fall learning. We recently, as you probably all know, I think I shared with you the part 2 of the ISB guidance that really talked about phase 3 learning and gave some indications of what we could do for summer and summer school, but they still haven't gotten to any indication of the fall. So we're awaiting that guidance. They've not shared, ISB has not shared when they, or even a time frame when the next phase or part of guidance for fall instruction will come out. So there is a little bit of waiting. Later in this presentation, or excuse me, later in the superintendent's report, we'll talk about some of the reopening work that we're doing, because it's critical to us that we have all these structures in place. So as we get guidance, we can continue to move forward and do work. So we'll talk about some of those and some of the pretty significant challenges that we're experiencing, and also the regional approach that we're trying to take by talking with other school districts to come up with some common plans, because anything we do will impact the school districts around us, because many of our staff live in other local school districts. So we're trying to look at planning together and being really smart about this, so that if our kids live in District 300 and District 300 is doing something and their kids are remote, that impacts our teachers' ability to sometimes have childcare or perhaps even get to work. So we want to try to really work together on this, but I do have a number of slides that I'll share later connected to re-entry planning and the work that we have going on there.
Maureen, may I ask a question? This is Courtney. So a couple, I guess 2 questions about the curriculum specifically. In a public comment, I saw reference to iReady being an assessment resource. And it was my understanding that's a component of what iReady is, but there's like intentional practice and other aspects. So I was wondering if you could explain that. And then secondly, you made reference to a core resource for math. So I was just interested in a little more information about that.
Sure. So great question. Yes, you are correct. So iReady, it's really a two-part resource, an assessment suite, including a diagnostic assessment and standards mastery assessments and a few others, as well as an instructional resource. So a student takes the diagnostic assessment, they recommend 3 times per year. That information is super helpful to the teachers, helps them know how to plan, which students need what, but it also populates a customized learning path for the student. So if they are doing independent practice, that independent practice is geared specifically toward their needs. Along with that, in the instructional element of it, teachers could also assign instructional practice. So if today we're working on decimals and I would like to provide practice for all my students on decimals, the teacher can assign it. So it has both of those pieces. I will also add that that instructional piece, should we need to start the year remote or mainly remote with some in person, the teacher can still begin assigning instructional activities in iReady prior to the diagnostic. So if that takes a little time to get that done, we still can get started with iReady, and that will be the focus of the training. So you're right about that. The other piece about the core resource, I'm sorry, Courtney, did that address your question about the iReady?
Yes, thank you.
The core resource, so you might remember that we were really looking at several core resources and had the primary teachers really feeling like one resource was more appropriate, Bridges, for their students, and the intermediate teachers really feeling more strongly about Ready resource. We actually had a meeting scheduled on the 16th of March to take a look at, is it feasible to have, there were valid points on both sides of that. Is it feasible to have one resource for K2 and another one for 3-5? And how would we make that cohesive? We need to have a cohesive plan across the grades. That meeting obviously could not happen. So we feel like we need to make sure that our teachers have tools and resources at their fingertips, especially even now, given the fact that we could be bouncing back and forth from remote or in person, as we're hearing. But yet we did not want to sidestep the process of those K2 teachers that really, quite honestly, felt like Ready Classroom that they piloted was not an appropriate resource for primary students. What we ended up doing is coming to a kind of a combination approach where we're going to use a resource from Ready that is not the same resource they piloted, but is a toolbox that is very similar. It's in English, it's in Spanish, it has all the skill-based resources, and they're opening that up to us as part of our iReady subscription. So as part of that, they're making that open so teachers can go in and they can see by standard, by skill, here are some additional practice resources I can find, here are some teaching resources, here are some assessment tools that I can use. So they're opening that up to us so that we have what we need in place for the fall, yet we can still take a look and see at K2. We really didn't want to get into a situation where we've committed financially for a long-term basis to something we didn't feel confident in. But yet we wanted teachers to have what they needed now. So this was kind of our blended approach, that I would say, to make sure they have what they need, yet still maintain our ability to choose the best long-term core resource for the district.
Maureen, so something that's very important and core to us really is the application of what kids learn. So we think it's really important, and these resources hit on some of the foundational and repetition elements of learning and learning mathematics specifically, but still learning that without the context of applying it. Sometimes it's hard for kids to remember that and retain it. So application, real world experience still remains a critical element of learning math, experiencing math. And our goal is to get kids to be students who love mathematics, who are passionate about mathematics versus just something that is being done to them. So Maureen, can you talk a little bit about the balance of how these resources support the other resources that are in place?
Sure, and I will say that even the iReady team, they've been very, very helpful in customizing to our approach. So what will be common across the district is still, we will have our common scope and sequence for math that we develop. We feel like it's even more important that we have that, the common learning targets, and for each unit in math, an anchoring application focus. So there will still be an anchoring application-based task that anchors the learning. So we really do feel that students need to know, how is this used in the real world? What is the reason I'm learning this? So having that application focus to kind of center the unit, but then really building in additional elements for those skill practice helps us really maintain the best of both worlds. So we have that anchoring phenomena or task, and then plenty of skill-based resources that support that.
Thank you.
Maureen, can I just make one point clear? You did say there's a junior high component for iReady, correct?
Yes, there is, and that had not been part of our pilot at junior high. Yet, given the closure and a few other circumstances, the junior highs reached out. They would like to know if they can also be a part of this, maybe not purchasing the iReady, but piloting it, so that we do have for next year at least a K-8 resource for math that, from a parent perspective, if remote learning is needed, it would be a consistent tool. So that we're kind of in the conversation about that.
We are looking at trying to find platforms that provide as much independent learning as possible. I mean, we recognize for our younger children, they're going to need more support from their parents during a remote learning type of piece. But as we're examining resources, even over the course of the summer, we're trying to find platforms like iReady that have effective practice elements that kids can do on their own. So this is an adaptive measure, as Maureen indicated before. So it adjusts to meet the kids where they're at in their instructional level. So the practice that they get is appropriate and tailored for them. And we're looking at other areas as well to try to find tools like that. So no matter if we're in remote learning or a hybrid or a blended learning or even in person, we'll have a solution that'll provide opportunity for more independent practice outside of school.
And Maureen, I'm sorry if I could ask just one last follow-up question, just for my understanding. You mentioned that anchoring application focus. I'm wondering if that's maintaining an element of the learning experiences. Like, I know within the math units, they had some kind of application, like the, building of the roller coaster and the mathematical components of that applied to it. So I'm wondering if that piece is retained from the learning experiences, or is that piece coming from the resources that we're acquiring?
No, that's a great question. That piece is really coming from the learning experiences. It may not be the exact same ones we've had before. We're taking a look at our scope and sequence, particularly knowing that we're going to be really addressing gaps at the beginning of the year. So it may not be the exact same task that was part of the learning experience, but something very similar, something that can launch the unit, get the kids excited, help them see, like, why do we need to learn this math? And then celebrate at the end, having done that. So you're exactly right. That's where those pieces will mainly be coming from. I should also add that our scope and sequence for math really is built on the major standards. So in Common Core state standards for math, major standards in math are distinguished from supporting standards, and that they really are the critical ones for the grade level. So our scope and sequence has always placed those in the early parts of the year, really right up until the closure period. So we had already addressed those major standards before the closure. That doesn't mean that there wasn't still practice and mastery needed after that, but we'll continue to build our scope and sequence in math in that manner. We do that mainly because we know IAR testing is in March, April. We want to make sure that any major standards are addressed prior to that. So that will still be our practice. Just wanted to clarify that as well.
Hey, Maureen, I got a question. It's Randy.
Hi, Randy.
How you doing? When I was talking about the resources for, that will allow for e-learning if necessary. Are we building into our professional development plan, or is that more of a question for Tom for the summer? Because I mean, if we, find out in a month or so that hey, we're going to be starting out e-learning this fall, and we're going to pick up these new learning modules, we're planning for development or training of the teachers and the staff with that, correct?
Yeah, and I'll start, and then Tom can jump in if he wants to add anything to that. But yes, I think really typically our summer PD, we would have already communicated and shared and started. But knowing that we're wanting to make sure that anything that is really critical to remote learning is part of that, we are still tweaking that summer professional learning plan so that we can make sure we include the essential trainings for staff if needed. We usually offer quite a wide variety of trainings. We're feeling like if we're going to be remote or hybrid, we might need to target our trainings to those really essential pieces. Tom, is that accurate, or would you?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great explanation. And as Maureen mentioned earlier, iReady is a big component of the summer piece, and actually the company will be facilitating at least, I think, the core pieces of that training. We're also looking at offering some online, the digital resource, Seesaw, Google Meets types of platforms just to enhance staff capacity. And then honestly, everything that's been developed, whether it's SEL-based, instructional-based, technology-based, has a component of remote learning or classroom-type learning. So all the facilitators that develop courses went through that process. But Maureen is very accurate in saying, we're not in a rush to jump in and do what we've always done because we want to understand a little better of those next steps. And if we need to postpone some courses to really focus in on things like offer additional iReady courses or other things, we'll go ahead and do that. And usually we end the year, we have a June type sessions based on this year's budget, and then July, August on next year's budget. So we do have a lot of resources allocated for that piece.
Great, thanks.
Any other math questions or comments?
Thank you, Maureen.
Sure. All right, well, I will keep the mic here and introduce a little bit about language acquisition and dual language, which I will say was one of the most challenging areas in remote learning to really, truly, I'm sure, along with special ed probably and IEP services, to really try to effectively meet the needs of language learners during remote learning was a challenge. Andrea and Griselda have been networking with other districts very heavily and attending many webinars and researching this so that should we need remote learning again, we can really try to intensify those supports for our dual language and English learners. So a lot of the work in the fourth quarter centered around language acquisition in remote learning and trying to make sure that students still had those supports. Our ESL resource teachers created a lot of materials and resources for our teachers to share. So that was a big focus of the fourth quarter, along with the dual language hiring committee and looking to make sure that we have secured staff for our positions for the fall. I know they had another round of interviews today, so that work continues. It's very active work. Some of the pieces that are coming up this summer would be really continuing to embed the language acquisition supports into our current curriculum work. For example, and this is a piece that I would say many resources we look at for pilot or for potential use do not have. So this is something that we're seeing more and more companies adding these pieces, but it's not as common as we would hope. So for example, social studies, junior high work, the language acquisition team is working on that this summer. Previously, they've done a lot of work with science, with math, trying to make sure that even in the junior high, especially, our content area teachers, the resources they use have those supports and language development strategies built in. We know that our English learners can be in a variety of different classrooms and really encouraging that language acquisition for all approach.
Can Can you hear me, Janice? Could I ask a question of Maureen?
Of course.
Would you please explain what Leo Cox was commenting about? Because I believe the $90,000 a year program he was talking about is the iReady. Is that correct?
That is correct. It was the iReady. That is for K-5. And again, that includes for math, Mardell. That is assessment and instructional components.
Okay, but he claims that it's mostly assessment. And I'm wondering, what is there an agenda of, or a continuum of what is being taught in math? Decimals, fractions, whatever the heck it is along the way. That's the way parents, I think, and the public are more used to seeing a curriculum where there's a continuum of what they will be learning. Is there such a thing?
In iReady, there is, Mardell. It is based on, so the student takes a diagnostic, it's a digital resource. So that means students work on that on their computer or their device. So they take an assessment, and then the activities, the instructional activities that it suggests for them are based on where they are in the continuum. If they're working at a second grade level in a certain skill, it provides lessons and activities at a second grade level, continuing to push them up. If they're at a sixth grade level, it provides them with that. Yeah. Or a teacher can assign that.
It's a combination, Mardell, and many school districts use only this resource as their full math curriculum. We use this, and we have additional resources and supports as well.
Thank you.
I will say that iReady also, one of the downsides was that the iReady pieces, the diagnostic instruction, was not fully in English and Spanish, and now for the fall, it will be. So that will really help us make sure that when we're assessing students, we know that it was assessed, could be assessed in the language that they're going to be more successful in. So we're getting a true picture of their math performance versus their language ability.
Also, you did pilot another one that the teachers were not happy with. And I'm sure you're probably looking for more things that we can use. Is there any possibility that there is a written curriculum, a good written curriculum that would go along with the iReady? So there would be actual something in writing that this is what they're doing this semester or this month or this week or whatever. So people would know where their children were supposed to be.
Yeah, Mardell, we will have that. It will be, like you said, some people weren't in favor of one thing, or we had a lot of, really, because there wasn't anything that was the best out there that we saw. So there was some, I would say, a lack of consensus on that. But where we landed was really, we will have this companion to iReady that is a core resource that will provide what you're saying. We will still set the scope and sequence and our learning targets, because we want to make sure that it's reflective of all those major standards. But the teachers will have a resource, Mardell, that they can go to. It'll be a companion to iReady that will have what they need for any of the skills they need to teach.
And to be clear, Mardell, we already have a scope and sequence and math learning targets in place. What we're doing now is adjusting that so that iReady also aligns to that as well.
So I think really the major work remaining for language acquisition and dual language is really how, given next year, how can we make sure that students who are English learners get the appropriate instruction? I think one of the comments, public comments that we heard included something about really maximizing the skills and strengths of our teachers. So in the spring, our ESL resource teachers stepped in and they did a lot of those lessons and shared them with classroom teachers. I think looking more and capitalizing on that, including the idea has even been brought up of videotaping language bends, which are those introductory activities, and for teachers, so that teachers who may not feel comfortable yet with that type of instruction, we make sure that our students nevertheless get that. They get the language bends, the oracy practice. That's kind of where we are feeling like that future planning lies, at least the immediate future, going into next year. So those are a few highlights of language acquisition.
I just think that's a great opportunity to really leverage what our teachers know about, so that the strongest possible people who have the best training in those areas can help benefit all children. So I think that's a great opportunity, since we're remote learning anyway, possibly.
Right.
Nice work.
Yeah, I would agree, Maureen. Just a piece to add to that, kind of with my parent hat on from personal experiences. There were some videos that were uploaded really with the phonics components in Spanish with the dual language piece that I think, as trying to be a remote teacher, were really, really helpful, and also maintained that sort of listening and oracy skills and connection to the language that a parent who might not be native to the language is not going to be as good at. And those were both in English and Spanish. So I think, depending where we end up, having like a video library of those that we continue, I think is really valuable from the standpoint of kids hearing and practicing the language. There was both. There was like a listening and a repetition where they recorded those sounds, which I thought was great.
Yes, that was actually, the phonics was the first. There were several areas that we saw that talent and skill emerged, and we could capitalize on it. I think that's kind of what we want to do. The phonics was one, the phonemic awareness, a number corner. So I think we want to leverage the skill and strength of all of our staff.
And it still applies even when we are finally back meeting face-to-face, assuming that happens sometime soon. They can still utilize those recorded messages.
Yeah, imagine how we're going to be able to use technology so much more effectively, even when we're back in person, whether it's meets or video chats or those kind of things. So I think we've all, this experience will help us get even stronger.
What are we using to determine how much English the Spanish students are acquiring? How do we know how much they are getting out of the dual language program, the English language learners? Because our main job is to teach English language learners the English language. How do we know that the dual language is working in that respect? What do we have? What figures do we have?
Oh, Mardell, what we use for that is the Access, which is a state assessment that is administered every year for all English learners, regardless of what program that you're in. It's an annual state assessment. Our scores for actually for 2020 arrived it's administered in January and February. We just received those a few weeks ago. So each year we look at that. And as you probably remember, that is also now a part of our school report card data, our growth on English language proficiency. So that is the measure that we use primarily for that.
Could you share those with the board?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure that'll be part of typically that's part of our data presentation. So for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, looks like we're ready to discuss intervention.
Katie?
Wonderful, thanks. All right, so for intervention this year, we really focused towards the end of the year on differentiating at an even higher level. That is always part of our tiered instruction. However, with remote learning, we did a lot of work with our interventionists to help them assist and collaborate our core teachers to provide even further levels of differentiation for students while they are at home and experiencing remote learning. We know that there may be very different experiences for our kids in their home environments as it relates to remote learning. So we wanted to make sure that we were differentiating to the highest extent possible. And now in terms of differentiation, we're doing a lot of review of tier 1 practices that have been successful with different groups of students to meet their varying needs. And the reason that we're doing that is whether we're back remotely or in person or in a hybrid model next year, we want to place an even higher level of focus on that differentiation as gaps may emerge. So we have explored lots of options using our data that's in Branching Minds and our Midas data exploration tool to see what's working really well. And Tricia Senni, along with Dr. Robinson, have been collaborating with our principals and administrators to talk through what those structures to support intervention will look like for next year, both in a remote learning sense or an in-person sense. So that has been the bulk of the work. We've also been focusing on our tier 3 resources. So that was part of our goal from the beginning of the year, to look at what resources we have in the district, what's being used and what's successful, and revamp if needed. So we're in the process of that right now. And as Maureen discussed a little bit earlier, with the opportunities for diagnostics and some virtual learning tools like iReady, we anticipate the future work is really going to be looking at where our students are coming in, exploring that assessment data, and then looking at our tier 1 instructional tools to determine what type of intervention is going to be best for students at each level going into next year in remote learning. So as always, we want our intervention to build upon the core curriculum. And so as we continue to make those decisions and get those resources and materials lined up, and as we have diagnostic data for students to tell us where they may have strengths or areas of need, then we will build intervention on top of that, so we continue to have layered supports. And utilize our staff very creatively to do so. So our interventionists, our coaches, our ESPs can all potentially support intervention in both a remote sense or if we are in person. So that's really the focus of the work in intervention right now.
So Katie, if I could ask a clarifying question just to bring it to I guess, like a tangible, like practical level. So when you're talking about assessing where the kids are at in the tier 1,
yep.
Like, I'm going to throw out an example and tell me if this is relevant or not. But like, if we're looking at math, for example, we see that 3rd graders are, from our assessment data, like lacking in triple digit subtraction. So the idea would be, what tools do we have, whether in iReady or in this toolbox or other resources, that we can then adjust our core curriculum to be able to reflect that, like, this whole subset of 3rd graders seems to be missing this skill. Is that the idea?
That's correct, right? So when we have diagnostics, that's really the strength of that, is we can look at specific skill sets and see where do we have groups of students who are needing this, and then how can we respond to that group. So sometimes it looks like adjusting tier 1 rather than adding more intervention. And with remote learning, if we find that there are certain skill sets or certain competencies that we now have a gap in, then we can adjust our instruction to focus more on that gap, or provide additional tools, time, instruction, support to students to fill that gap. So it's very real time, right? Because as soon as we have the data, then we plan for the instruction, and then we plan for the intervention or support that gets layered within it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
I just want to say that I think it's really great that we have the capacity to take a look at this data in such an effective way so that we can meet the needs of our students. So thank you for all the hard work in that area.
Yeah, and thank you to our assessment team who greatly supports that. I mean, they're really providing it for all of the district level teams who are then analyzing it. So we're very thankful for them.
Which is a great way to segue into assessment.
Nice transition. Thank you, Dr. Offel. So Tom Ludloff, the reality of assessment this spring was pretty much everything we would collect and have access to paused. So I think we heard in the comments from the public that, yeah, there's no state testing this year, no Illinois assessment of readiness, no Illinois science assessment. Everything pretty much stopped in March. So that will create some, future down the road pieces of comparing data and growth and things like that. But that's just reality. We also were unable to complete our spring benchmarking, which also gives us, a look at growth over the course of the year and comparisons over time. But the flip side of that piece, and I think you heard it throughout from many of the comments from Maureen and Katie, we're really focused in on diagnostics when we come back in the fall. So what kind of data can we get about where kids are at instructionally that teachers can use to plan and deliver instruction for individuals and groups of kids? We're excited and still learning about iReady, but excited about the iReady piece just because that diagnostic component can really drive classroom instruction, and also, I think, as was mentioned, support and practice outside of school. So on the math side, we're feeling really good about coming back, whether we're in remote or not, because we can collect that data. Obviously, we'll have to walk kids through that process, but be able to collect that remotely or if we're in person. There's another component, I think Maureen mentioned it, called the standards mastery piece, where we'll be able to collect some formative data connected to standards in the math curriculum, both the learning experiences and what's in iReady. So another nice component about, where are kids at diagnostically, and then how do they align with the standards being taught. So we're feeling really good about math, at least going in. The struggle will be with reading data in a diagnostic fashion. That type of data we collect, Fontes and Pinnell, is diagnostic formative data we collect. That's a one-to-one assessment, teacher sitting directly with a student and collecting that data. And that, as Maureen mentioned, may be difficult to complete. We've even seen some feedback from the state saying, you shouldn't share any materials. Well, we use books for kids to go through that process. They share those books. So even that process might be impacted. We also do early reading and early math and FAST. Again, one-to-one, 15-minute assessments, teachers and kids, and that may be difficult to collect that information. I think the biggest question we have is for our kindergarten students. Students will have no information on, for the most part, unless they're from the preschool, coming into the system. But we started to, in our studies of spacing and things as we re-enter and return to school, of finding ways potentially to bring small groups of kids in to potentially collect that data. Again, we're still working on that piece. Something we're working on the assessment side is we're actually we're accumulating data right now from the winter, and we're going to create something called a data by student data package for each school and grade level. And basically that'll be any pieces of data we have, FAST, FMP, any data we've collected over especially from fall into winter, and we'll package that up and give it to schools by grade level and by classroom teacher. So while it's not up-to-date data, it's where kids left. So if I was letter D in kindergarten in the winter, well, that first grade teacher will be able to see, well, that's where Tom was when he left. The nice part on the literacy side is instruction is so connected to the actual skills they demonstrate in the assessments that if Tom's a D and he's reading a D book, I don't necessarily need to assess him to see if he's there or not. So some of that small group instruction, one-to-one instruction that may be in place whether we're in school or not, teachers can collect that information in a little different way. But our focus is on diagnostic. We want to give teachers as much data as we can based on where they were at when they left, to put kids into groups, to understand where they were at, and really build on their instruction as we return in the fall, and whatever that looks like. On the math side, we'll have a lot more information to use and guide that process. So that's kind of the big pieces. What we've done this spring, while we've not had all those assessments to facilitate and compile, we've been working on some of our data packages and organizing data. As Katie mentioned, the Midas tool was something we've really deployed, I would say, at a high level this year, and schools and teams have been able to use. And that's another piece as we're looking at iReady. How can we then incorporate that data into a Midas data exploration tool so we can use that data more in the big picture kind of way that we've done with a lot of our data this year?
I have a question or a request. Could you please expand on your thinking and plans for developing key performance indicators and developing a dashboard? I know some work has been going on in that area.
So I think that piece, at least the way I would understand it, we've been, as part of the strategic planning process, there's a key piece to that being key indicators, that each goal, each strategy within those goals would have an indicator of success and growth towards things. So if we, one of our goals is curriculum clarity. So if part of curriculum clarity was a goal of implementing a new math curriculum, a resource, I should say, how would we measure that piece, and how would we then drop that into a dashboard so that as we implement the strategic plan, we would have these key indicators and be able to see our status and how we're working towards that. So from an assessment perspective, we have access to all this information and ways to organize it and present it and share it. And that's the piece we've been working on behind the scenes. Unfortunately, with the pause in in-person learning and working and planning, we were right at that point, strategic planning wise, where those committees and groups were going to start to roll those pieces out. I do think every of the strategies we're looking at, where we've been working on focus areas, so we've started to already think about what those key indicators could be to be able to report to the board and to the public in general. A nice piece to that is Dr. Fessler and I learned as we went through some training in the spring is it's almost like a temperature gauge. You'd use different colors and graphs to be able to show we haven't started, we're in progress, we're almost done, we've completed that piece. And it gives really everyone a good, easy way to see progress and then what's most important within those areas.
Yeah, and I guess I'm also thinking not only as an organization to be able to move forward, but as far as growth and proficiency regarding our students. And I assume that that's also going to be part of your planning as we finally are able to start working on some of this once we get past some of the distractions of remote learning.
Yeah, I think the hard part with some of those more specific to state type data is with the pause in this process. We won't have any data to compare growth or proficiency from the previous year. Unfortunately, actually, we were, I know it's easy to say, of course, we were somewhat excited to go into the spring testing. We tried some different approaches this year, had some nice exposure to preparing and practicing, and schools were feeling pretty good about the state testing piece that we'll lose in this mix. So I do think we'll look at some of these diagnostic pieces, especially iReady, as a means to show progress, at least next year or fall to winter. You know, one thing we've had some preliminary discussions about is fast testing. Now, fast testing is a screener. It's a big picture piece of data and does give you individual student data. That's great. But we use that to judge progress and growth over the course of the year, that if we're limited in the assessment time we have, we might not implement our full FAST assessment so that we could get better data, more connected to where kids are at and what we can support at the building level. But
I think that's a good idea because obviously we're really more concerned about how well our students are doing individually and how well they're moving towards growth and achievement. And I totally concur with you on the level of disappointment I felt in not being able to assess our students this spring, because I've been very, very excited about the work we've been doing with RISE and other initiatives to meet students where they are and help them grow in their capabilities and their mastery of important areas. And so I think that work is still going to happen in the district. So I'm thrilled that, you know, we will be able to ultimately demonstrate a strong movement towards proficiency as well as growth.
Yeah, and just to build on that, Janice, we were seeing some pretty significant increases on the data that we'd collected in some of the schools that were running some intervention programs. And resulting from that, as you know, and I think other board members are aware, you know, part of our initiatives for next year is to really look at every school and develop intervention programs, and we're calling them WIN programs. So that's an acronym for what I need. So it's really addressed to meet every kid where they're at. So if students have some gaps, we want to work there. But also if kids have or need some acceleration, we want to try to build on those areas as well. So a couple of schools last year piloted some WIN programs, and they had really good success. You named a couple of them by name, but we're generically calling these just WIN structures. And we're going to give buildings a lot of autonomy to own that work, to look at areas that they want to address, and make it a grassroots, but it will all be data based. So, we have 14 schools. We had one exemplary 13 that also did very, very well. And then one school that didn't meet expectations last year. And I know all of them thought that they were going to improve, on their performances for the IAR. So it was a little disappointing because we did have some big expectations for results this year. So.
Well, I'm really, really happy about the movement towards providing that data that we need to make sure we know where to target, strategically target instruction. And I think that we are across the board really moving strongly in the right direction. And I look forward to finally getting to see some data when the time is right.
Yeah, and Patty mentioned earlier the importance of training. That's another area that we will absolutely focus on this school year, is professional development and the use of taking smaller bits of data and utilizing that to inform our practice, and then also to evaluate our programs on things that are occurring in our schools instructionally. Mm-hmm. So I think we've made some. Tom has done an amazing job with his group, along with Katie, Trish, and Corey, really taking not just the assessment, but really adding and developing tools that are easy to access, because that's another piece that is sometimes concerning with data. You have so much data, it's just hard to aggregate and look and study it all. And with Midas and some of the other tools that we're using, we can put together reports, tables, in a really quick manner that staff can navigate relatively quickly. And it's much more meaningful and a more positive experience.
Absolutely.
Can I interject something? What I wanted, I get the idea of working with these kids and giving them what they need. However, it seems like if you're going to do that, especially when we have kids that are behind, somehow we're going to have to break up into smaller groups and have more people interacting with these kids. So what are your plans? Because you already have class sizes for your teachers that you already have in place. What is the plan? I mean,
that's absolutely the concept, and that's absolutely what we did in a couple of schools. Is Nicole Robinson, Nicole, are you on the call?
I didn't see Nicole on the call earlier.
So Nicole is one of the schools that launched a math initiative, and that's absolutely what they did. They break kids into ability groups in terms of what their current working condition what their current working level would be in a particular math area. And then they used all hands on deck. So a combination of teachers with that group, and then also the utilization of some of the support and also coaches to help small group instruction and intensify that. So they took a block of time out of the day every day and went all hands on deck with math instruction. Kim Barrett did something similar with literacy in her building this school year too. So that's absolutely the concept that we piloted last year and that we're looking to roll out in all schools this year.
Okay.
I think, could you address maybe Art a little more, or someone a little more explicitly, the idea that we're focusing really heavily on the foundational skills and K through 2?
Yeah, absolutely. Maureen can speak explicitly to that.
Yeah, I think, are you talking about literacy or math, Janice, or both, or?
Both in general.
I mean, I feel like for math, the foundational skills really are somewhat different than literacy in that they go across the grade levels. So there's these fluency standards that are really the critical pieces. I would say for literacy, our focus at K2 really is not only on those foundational skills, but I think we've increased our emphasis on things like phonics and phonemic awareness, added that to our reading and writing workshop so that it is a more blended approach or balanced approach, I would say, at K2. We still would like to do some additional professional development with staff, a K2 staff. That was something we had planned for the summer. We're going to see, you know, if we need to focus on the essentials, we might need to find another way to make sure that our students have that instruction. But we've definitely increased that focus on phonics and phonemic awareness at the primary level.
See, I see that as a foundational skill. So I guess you define it slightly differently.
No, those are foundational. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I misunderstood what you said. No, I think that that's fabulous. And of course, I was also volunteering in the classroom when mostly PTO parents were also supporting the math initiative at Salt Creek. So they really put in a lot of supports for those kids with games and, you know, exciting ways to help them develop to the level that you would want them to be performing at in those grade levels. So I think it's been fabulous.
It was pretty exciting last week at one of our final alt meetings to have principals sharing their ideas, their initial strategies, hearing, I mean, the creative scheduling to make the best use of all hands on deck is pretty amazing. So there's some great ideas started and ready for next year.
Great. Well, and I'm looking forward to Nicole also making sure this has her championship and the focus on those things, because man, it's a lot of stuff that's happening at the same time, and providing that focus during this year is just going to be a fabulous opportunity to move forward.
If I could jump in and ask one more question about assessment, is that okay?
Of course.
Okay. Tom, I'm wondering, and maybe it's Maureen too, but I know we've done this great work in math and we've expanded into other areas to develop the learning targets. And I think that fulfills or helps move us in the direction of like having this nice balance of both building like practical skills and application as well as the content piece, right? Like we have certain foundational content in math and other subjects we want our kids to know. So these learning targets help to ensure we're meeting those. And I guess what I'm wondering is, how will our assessment dashboard, MIDAS, be able to help us gauge how students are meeting or not meeting those learning targets?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So this year we were fully able to utilize something we call the common standards-based assessments. So that was a tool where I believe 3 to 4 times a year, it depends on the content area, we collect data from kids. I'll use writing as an example. So connected to the learning experience piece, kids would have a writing activity and then would be assessed by the teacher, and we'd collect that data and then have it to see where kids are at. Teachers can use it to plan instruction, and then as a system, we can look at it. So we were able to, in one of our, during this interim time, we accumulated all of that common standards-based data to take a look at, let's say, the literacy pieces across the year. So the tough part with that assessment is while we're getting those standards-based pieces, it's a pretty limited assessment and it's about 10 questions. And we're covering a few standards that go with that. And Maureen, please jump in. So it's hard to key into exactly how maybe an individual student did. We were, at least from my perspective, district-wide, we were looking at the district system and the curriculum connected with that. What's exciting about the iReady piece is, and Maureen mentioned they've already done a lot of this work in math, is streamlining those learning targets, and we'll really be able to connect them to the instruction and the assessment. And what's really interesting with iReady is we'll be able to do pre-post very efficiently, at least what we've seen so far. So we'll be able to see a classroom, a grade level, a student, these 3 standards. I started here, now I was learned, I had instruction, now I'm here. And that's where I think we're trying to work as the full system. Maureen, does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say that the challenge with math is that there are these fluency standards that kind of you're building throughout the year. They're kind of always there. They're like the expectations for fluency for that grade level. Yet in this unit, we might be focusing on decimals. So the common standards-based assessment, the challenge was some of the test items were given at a point where mastery was expected, and others, students might be still building toward that. So we really do feel like the iReady will give us both. The diagnostic, if we administer 3 times a year, will kind of be that global picture. How is the student growing in all the math skills for that grade level? Whereas the standards mastery one will zero in on a specific standard. So that really will probably inform how we approach the common standards-based assessment in the future. And then for reading and writing, just making sure we have those targets. That is a big piece of the summer work, because the math team did a great job with those targets. We want to make sure that the other areas have those similar targets as well.
Thank you.
Isn't that the goal, that all areas are going to have those learning targets?
Correct. Yeah. So, and they'll be modeled similarly after the math ones. And what the teams are working on this summer are not just where we don't have those, what are the targets overall? And then even looking at, knowing that we're going to have our year is going to look a little different next year. What are those essential targets for that grade level, even the grade level prior? So we can kind of build that in, but that's a little bit more about the reentry work.
Mm-hmm. I remember now, I had a question, and I was wondering if you could address the comment where it says under future planning to review low scoring reading common standards-based assessment items and modify if necessary. Is that almost referring about such a limited number of questions? Is that for literacy?
Yeah, that was a literacy piece, I think. So that was really referring to, so our common standards-based assessment, most of the assessment items come from previous PARC released items. So
okay.
The items mimic the PARC IAR format. So sometimes we'll see when we start looking at that data, maybe there's a test question where 90% of the students got it wrong. So we'll go back to that test item and say, okay, let's take a look at that test item. And for example, one of them we saw, it was a vocabulary item. And we could really even see like, gosh, I could see where either A or C could be correct. This is a very confusing item. Let's not use this in the future. Let's replace it with something else.
Okay.
So really just looking at those, whether maybe we look at the low scoring item and we say, wow, this standard we need to really work harder at or intensify, or we might look at that test item and say, gosh, this is really not very well worded. It's confusing. It's not a good test item.
Okay.
Janice, you may recall that 2 years ago, we had a curriculum audit with the Regional Office of Education, and that was some of the feedback that they gave us, and then some of the support they provided in terms of developing some more PARC-like assessments at the time.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on the literacy piece or any other of the pieces we've covered so far?
All right, thank you. Hey, Janice, point of order here. We have one more presentation, and I split them up intentionally because we just presented a lot of comment. I know that we moved through those slides and talked about a lot of different things, but the other presentation that I wanted to share with the board tonight was about reentry, and just thinking about the audience. I'm not sure what type of audience we have listening to this, but I do have that scheduled under the superintendent's report. Do you guys need a break to move through the consent agenda and action items, or would you prefer to hear the reentry planning and thinking at this point in the agenda?
I'm fine either way. I think doing it now would be fine. I do want to, before we move on though, I want to ask the board, since there was so much covered in the other portions of this presentation that we were reading, and I had a lot of questions myself. If you would like to schedule another meeting in June for the purpose of discussing this, and I talked to Art about this too, and perhaps it would be a really great time to relaunch the new strategic plan, covering it with us. Did you want to add anything, Art?
I think this kind of fits in that format that, Randy, this was one of the concepts you mentioned of having those additional meetings. We were going to call it a committee of the whole meeting to go more in depth and focus on a particular topic. So when you brought that up tonight, Janice, I thought that was a really good idea to, again, finish closure to the old strategic plan, relaunch, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the new strategic plan tonight, but relaunch, go into detail, and then begin to work on our areas of focus for next school year. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
How does the rest of the board view that? I know there was an interest in going more deeply into assessment, considering we're not really assessing right now. That's not critical for this absolute minute.
I'm good with whatever we want to do.
Good.
It's Randy. I kind of like the idea of, talking about the new strategic plan and having a kind of a discussion about that before the school year starts, or we start our July fiscal year.
Okay.
I know we kind of talked about, we have, what's going to happen into next year. I mean, how long do you think that discussion is going to be, Art?
Probably 2 hours.
Okay. So do we want to maybe not even have that discussion tonight and save that for another meeting in June?
Sure, I can just do I'd like to do the re-entry planning just to, give you an idea of the things that we're doing, talking about the process. At the end of that, I was going to talk a little bit about strategic planning and focus area work that we're doing right now. But yeah, I can save that part of it. So then it would just be a presentation on the re-entry planning.
Well, what does the rest of the board think about going over the rest of the focus areas that maybe weren't the most critical ones, but are still important, and there's a lot of significant work being done? Do you want to spend part of the meeting answering questions about that, or would you rather forward questions to me or to Dr. Fessler, and then he can share out the answers? That's an alternative.
I guess I would be in favor of forwarding those questions, because I obviously ask a lot of questions already. I did have one question related to the long-term facilities plan for the finance and facilities slide. So I'd be happy to just email that question, and if the full board could receive a response, that's good.
Anybody else want to weigh in? Are you out there?
Yeah, that sounds fine to me.
Okay. What about Chris and Robert and Mardell?
Yeah, this is Robert. I agree with Courtney. I'm fine with submitting questions.
I'm sorry, what? You're not quite loud enough.
I said I agree with the process of submitting questions.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, still on the question submission.
Okay. All right. Sounds like a plan. So why don't you submit them to Art, and then maybe he can batch them. He can wait a few days, but you should do this, in the next couple of days so that he's got them all in one place. And then he can share back out the results.
If you can hear me, Janice, I am in favor of us having another meeting in June to go over the strategic plan and come up with our definite goals. And it's got to be the board and the superintendent working together on that.
Oh, we're going to go over the strategic plan. It was just a question as to whether or not we were going to go over these other focus areas that were part of.
I mean, that should be a separate meeting is my point.
Yes, it will be. I think that's what we're agreeing upon at this point. So yes, we'll go ahead and get that scheduled. Thank you. Art, why don't you jump into your piece then?
Okay, so the re-entry planning.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So as I shared with you last week, the ISB and the Department of Health released a joint phase 2 plan. And these are the scenarios, how they've identified them. And actually, this is an interpretation by the IASA SWAT team, which was ordered by the governor, that consists of superintendents, legislators, union leadership, and they developed names for the 3 scenarios that are being considered. So modified on-campus, hybrid learning, and then the remote learning 2.0, and then the definitions that they're utilizing. So I expect we'll probably see this model in the literature and in communications in the future. So in a modified on-campus, schools open with significant changes, including social distancing, alternative schedules, modified capacity. And I think it's important to note that we're still in phase 3. We would have to be in phase 4 in order for that to happen. I did hear that the positivity rates in Illinois as of today are 11%. So that has dropped significantly over the last couple of weeks. So that's a good sign. We'll see how some of the reopening impacts that positivity rate in the next few weeks. But if things hold as they are, we're hoping that we will be in phase 4 sometime in late June or early July. The hybrid learning, again, assuming that we're in phase 4, schools will employ a hybrid approach to teaching and learning, with students experiencing both at home and on-campus learning. And then remote learning, due to public health concerns, students and staff are required to utilize remote learning. New guidance for attendance, grading, and accountability will be implemented. And I think that's an important thing to note, that if we are in a scenario similar to how we finished the school year, where we're in a phase 2 or phase 3, there will be new guidance for attendance, grading, accountability that will be provided to school systems. So I believe that we'll be somewhere in the top 2 areas of planning, which present a lot of challenges for all school districts. So roughly a couple of weeks ago, we developed a reentry plan team committee that put some initial recommendations together. I think Maureen shared those in the Friday update. But I just want to acknowledge the people who were on that team. So this is the committee that Maureen facilitated with Katie Assel and a number of teachers, leaders, and then also some DEA leadership as well. So, it's essential that we look at developing some priorities for school. So we're working on the development. And I do want to preface this by saying that this is a draft, and we have lots of conversation, ongoing conversation to add to our priorities for returning to access. But just a few that I've mentioned here. I also want to say that I've pulled content from a lot of the conversations that I've had with other area superintendents. I meet every Tuesday and Thursday with some of the North Cook superintendents, a couple of the Lake County, and then I've been also in close contact with some of the western suburbs, particularly U46, because again, I know that in U46 and District 300, we have many staff that live in those areas. So it's important, again, that we try to take a regional approach, because whatever plan those school districts put into place, and if we have teachers that live in those school districts, that's going to impact their lives, their jobs, their families, depending on what scenario we're in. But trying to really plan together, coordinate, collaborate, share ideas, even looking at sharing resources, purchasing capability is something that's really important to all the local superintendents. So kind of an organization structure. We have 3 primary areas that we're going to look at. So 3 plan teams. We'll have an instruction team, an operation teams, and then a health, wellness, and safety. You can see that Maureen will chair the instruction team. Ross and Ron and Vicky for a little while will facilitate the operations, but as Vicky transitions off and Ron comes in, Ross will do much of the heavy lifting here, because Ron is still transitioning to the role. And then Dr. Katie Assel will facilitate the health and wellness. Above that, Ben and his team will work on consistent communications, and Tom will be the process manager. So as we talked about this today, even developing a document where everyone is entering their work, their ideas and things, so we can stay coordinated is really critical, because we want to have efficiencies. And then we have an oversight team that is the district leadership team, and then Ann Wing, who is the DEA president, is part of that team. We'll meet weekly or even more often as necessary to talk about the work, because if you've looked at the the part 2 recommendations, there is a significant amount of work just to reopen our schools, to be in compliance with the Department of Health and the CDC recommendations. And let's not forget, we have one school opening in the 3rd week of July. So a lot of work to do in a short amount of time. So definition oversight team really will guide the work of the plan team, and really will review the plans, make sure, again, we're not duplicating work, and then there'll be that final decision-making team. Team leaders serve as facilitators for the plan team. And then again, a critical role that Tom Ludloff will play in this process is the process manager, again, to sequence, coordinate. So he'll go in and out of team meetings, but again, we're using a capture-all document where everyone is recording their work, their recommendations. So the complete oversight team will have access to that. So again, we make sure that we're working as efficiently as we can, yet meeting all the needs of the planning. So just in terms of putting our initial teams together, so many of you guys were on the strategic planning team, and we're using a process similar to what the CEC had recommended that we use for the implementation of the strategic plan. So we have, again, these 3 major areas: health, wellness, and safety, instruction, and operations. Again, the 4th is that communication piece, which I listed as a 4th group, because as you know, it's so critical that our staff and our families and our organization knows what's happening during this time. So typically we don't send out as many communications in the summer. This week, it will likely be bi-monthly or as necessary communications to our staff and to our families, just updating them along the way, because we want them to be aware that we're spending a lot of time and a lot of human resources and capital, as well as financial, to make sure that we're talking about, all areas, all facets of planning. So in this model, the plan team, so health and wellness, we tried to identify the leaders in the district that have a stake in every area of the planning. So Denise Webster would actually start a subcommittee under this plan team that would really focus on the areas of some of the health. And we have a number of recommendations from state associations. I know Janice shared the school board recommendations. Those are awesome. We have those integrated into our resources. Same thing with instruction. We'll identify, and you can see some names that of the work that we've already done. These teams are meeting this week. They'll then develop their subcommittees, and then their subcommittees are going to next week begin a capture all. So looking at all the recommendations from IASA, which is our State Superintendents Association, from the School Board Association, and any other resources, ISB, of course, with their guidance, begin to do a capture all of all the work. Based on that, we'll prioritize and develop timelines, and then we'll develop or assign people to do that work. So again, if you look at the phase or the part 2 guidance, it's pretty significant in the 3 areas that they identify that have to be addressed as we open schools. So although this looks like there are quite a few people involved, this list will significantly increase. So we'll have leadership team members on this, as well as some of our teaching staff, especially when you start looking at the instructional areas. It's critical that we have staff involved with that as well. We do plan on sending some surveys. I believe we're sending where Tom's developing a staff survey right now that we'll be sending out. But at some point, we want to send a parent survey out as well. I think we're going to wait a little later in June so we can see what phase we will be in. So if we are in phase 4, we want to hear parents' preference and comfort level with sending their children to school or not sending their children to school. Likewise, we want to ask our staff the same question. And we think that there'll probably be some alignment with a number of staff who may not want to return to in-person instruction because of a lot of good and valid reasons, as we will have parents who may have similar concerns. Because again, I think that the students and the science is showing that the students are much more resistant to this, but when they become carriers and, we come together, and if kids are asymptomatic or receive the virus from another kid and then leave our system. That's the concern that we have. That's the concern that a lot of families will likely have, as well as staff. Any questions about what I've presented so far? Awesome. So
wait 1 second. I wanted to ask, because this came up today in just my own family. They say that kids would have to, over the 2 and over, would have to wear a mask. Is that something that we're going to have to be looking at as well? Because if we have kids in school and staff, they would have to have a mask on.
Yeah. So right now, the CDC and the health department has been very clear with their guidance about in-person instruction. So right now, there's not only spacing regulations, there's also mask regulations, hand cleaning. Some of the bigger challenges. I mean, the biggest challenge for us is going to be getting kids to school and then figuring out a schedule. I mean, for anyone who buses, I mean, we bus over 4,500 children each day. So that's a big challenge for us. But in the current recs, taking temperatures daily of staff, students, and anyone who enters the building. Imagine the amount of time at a middle school, even if we only have half the kids, of having 500 kids or 300 kids having their temperature taken. And then there are so many other variables that impact body temperature versus core temperature. So, we've had conversations about thermal cameras that do temperature checks as kids, walk in the school. We've got no touch thermometer conversations going on. Vicky's looking all over the globe at most competitive costs for PPE. So we've done a tremendous amount of work and research already, and things are becoming a lot more reasonable. But again, some of the things present such a large challenge, getting kids to school, getting them into classrooms, into spaces safely, and even determining, and I'm sure the phase or the part 3 recommendations will talk about space utilization and be much more specific about, fall parameters. But I fully expect a lot of autonomy and local control for the big picture things of what scheduling looks like, for kids at school. I do think the state will provide detail about instructional minutes, hours, grading, and things of that nature. But I do think there'll be a lot of big decisions that will be left up to local school districts. So you can imagine what differences could look like.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Any other questions so far?
Yeah, Dr. Fessler, has there been any instruction at all or even guidance as far as the school buses of what to expect?
Well, in phase 3, the guidance is you can't have more than 10 people in a particular space. So that applies to busing as well. In phase 4, again, there's still social distancing in place. So, we may only be able to have 12 people on a bus even in phase 4, and you can imagine, I mean, some of our routes, we have, 40, 50 kids on a bus. So I'm not quite sure what that will look like, Robert, in terms of, again, how we're going to get kids to school, but we could have some pretty significant transportation costs next year in terms of having to run continuous routes and having to be really savvy about how we schedule instruction in terms of getting kids in and out of the building and to and from school safely.
I mean, never mind the cost. I think that's exactly why ISBE is going to have to provide a lot of leeway to districts, because it's going to bankrupt districts, these kind of things.
Yeah. And I think another thing too is just there's so many unknowns, especially with that student that comes to the building with a temperature. Okay, what do we do with that student now? Where do we hold the student?
Right.
How long do we hold the student? When is the parent coming to pick them up? What if they can't come pick them up, et cetera, et cetera? There's so many of these factors to take into account.
Yeah, I mean, schools are in phase 3. Schools are required to have a holding area, and I think it's for any kid who has a temperature over 100.4. I think I read. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of stipulation in place, and then they have very specifics for quarantine, and it's a pretty detailed document. But again, it does show you how challenging it's going to be for school districts to get all these things in place. And even the availability of PPE. I know that things have calmed down slightly, but for a while, the cost of PPE was crazy. In the recommendations, you can use cloth reusable PPE, but it's supposed to be washed daily. So there are even regulations about that. I have a resource that I found that one of my colleagues, Hank Thiele, who's a superintendent, local superintendent, put together a summary. I'll share that link to that with the board, and you can kind of look through very quickly how the recommendations play out in the 3 areas. So
yeah, I was going to say, even if we did it like the hybrid model, for instance, the district would be supplying the PPE for these students, correct?
Say that again.
The district would be supplying the masks for the students if it was a hybrid model, for instance.
Yeah, you know, that's an interesting concept. I mean, we're going to buy a lot of masks, but you know, on a daily mask or I mean, we may have to look at the reusable and then get parents help in terms of cleaning and maintaining those, because replacing them on a daily basis, I don't think that we could do that. I don't think that there's the supply and then the cost. And again, you know, we have a significant resources in District 59. I think, you know, I talked a little bit about the regional approach of combining with other school districts to really get mass discounts and get some bulk pricing rates. So we'll do all of those things, but with 7,000 kids, to replace masks daily would be a huge task, and it could be quite challenging. So we're probably going to be looking at some combination of reusable and then having masks on hand if kids forget them. But
well, yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We've not done that planning. That's the planning of this group. And again, that's why it's important that Denise Webster facilitates a team that focuses on just those questions. So you've asked a lot of really good questions about one particular area, but there are equal as many questions in every area out there. So that's really the nature of this plan team is, you know, so, you know, Denise will have a subcommittee that will look at all those things. Elizabeth will have a subcommittee that will look at all the special education needs. Ashley will have a subcommittee that will look at all the SDL needs. And then again, Tom's role comes into play because every one of them is going to need some type of professional learning. Patty, I think you mentioned that earlier. Every one of these groups is going to need some type of professional training. Even when we get down into the instruction, you know, it is our goal that as we roll out additional platforms, our parents and staff are both going to need training on these areas. So, you know, Ben's group will work with Tom and we'll do some video training so people have access to those. We'll have some virtual trainings as well that we'll record, but you can see how there's a lot of moving cogs because there are so many parts and expectations that have to be in place to reopen school. So again, that's the nature of this plan. And as we move into the subcommittees, again, so I'll get a link here in the near future, but the health and wellness will have probably 5 or 6 different subcommittees. Instruction, same thing, different subcommittees, and operations will probably have several as well. And, you know, we're going into full force planning next week. So we're doing, plan team is getting together. They're developing subcommittees. We'll get people on those subcommittees and begin to prioritize and do that work. Janice, did you have a comment? Did I interrupt?
No, it's okay. I just want to say thank you for all this work. You guys have done a tremendous job in meeting the needs of students in remote learning at a very quick turnaround time. And now you're continuing to make sure that we have a very comprehensive, strong response in place that will meet as much of the needs of our students as we possibly can, given what teaching and learning might look like in the fall. So
thank you very much. I mean, we know it's going to be some type of a hybrid or blended approach because we're not going to be in phase 5. Phase 5 is vaccination and readily available. And I don't see that happening in the upcoming semester and maybe even for the school year. It's so hard to tell, but everything I've been hearing on the news related to the time that it takes to develop a vaccination and test it appropriately, it seems like even 18 months is historically fast. So we are looking at, you know, those first 2 options, and we will plan accordingly for those. And when we get the additional guidance, we'll add that guidance in terms of instructional minutes. But I do think that the guidelines from CDC and the Illinois Health Department won't change significantly to some extent to phase 4. So we'll be able to do a lot of that foundational planning and get our schools ready for open. Maureen will do a lot of work with her teams in terms of getting ready, platforms aligned. We are doing a little more research. We talked a lot about iReady Math. We're looking at some of the other iReady content areas, perhaps even ELA. So we'll be taking a look at some of those over the summer. And if we like those, we want to add those to our teacher resources as well. So I'll move through these next couple of slides quickly. Randy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, one thing you're talking about social distancing and, you know, in the classroom and stuff like that, have they given us any guidance on, like, you know, gym classes or the language arts or those type of things where kids are moving between classrooms and stuff like that? Or is that something that
no, I think
we have to plan for?
Yeah, there's a little bit of guidance in the phase 3. We've not seen phase 4 for that, but basically they're saying restrict movement, keep kids in classroom, move the adults. So, you know, some school districts are talking about having PE remotely and then maximizing those spaces for instruction. So being able to bring more kids in and utilize their gym, their cafeteria, and then do some type of a remote approach to some of those other pieces, and really try to focus on areas that, you know, let's look at where in-person instruction is most essential and try to address those needs first and then prioritize that way. So the conversations are very interesting. And very diverse. You know, depending on your resources in your community, it really impacts the way you can plan for this. Again, we're trying to do a regional approach. So we're collaborating as much as we can with the superintendents in the area. I'll go through these very quickly, and I'll share this link with the board. But you know, we're looking at developing guiding questions to guide each area. And then at the bottom, I've linked the resources that have been provided by the different organizations. And they're just a list of considerations for planning. So the School Board Association has, here's 25 things that you should be thinking about in instruction. So this is both the IASA and then the School Board Association. And these are the social emotional recommendations. So I've added those to each one of the slides for the guiding questions and then the associated resource.
Art, if I could just make a quick comment. I'm thinking that I am just really continually impressed by organizationally how we have tackled these unprecedented circumstances. And I'm thinking that as a parent, before I weigh in on a survey about what I would or would not be comfortable with in the fall, I would want to be aware of what's going on here. So I just plant that seed to say, like, how can we, and I think we've been doing a beautiful communication job, but I want to think about, like, how do we show parents all of the work that's being done in quick snapshots so that if I am a parent who's on the fence about, do I feel my kid's going to be safe in the fall? Like, I have comprehensive information to make that decision about how that's being planned. So
that's an awesome idea. You know, some of the other school districts are talking about focus groups, and I know we've had those conversations as well. So I think that would be awesome if once we get this plan a little more fully developed, maybe at the end of June, we have a few town hall, focus hall, virtual meetings where we can walk through this presentation. That's an awesome idea. If the board supports that, I would love to, and I know my team would be behind that. We would love to do that.
Love it. I think it's a great idea.
So we're the timeline, this is still a draft. We're working on the timeline, so I'm not going to kind of go through that because that's a work in progress. You know, I've talked kind of through the next steps that, you know, our goal is to bring our plan teams together, to develop subcommittees, and then start identifying all the minutia in the work, and then prioritize, and then continue that work. Again, we have an oversight team and a process manager that will help coordinate and making sure that we're working effectively on this, and then also not duplicating work. So in these last few slides, again, I'll share this with you. It just kind of talks about the phase 1 through 3, what the process looked like. Same thing with phase 4, you know, gatherings of fewer or 50, you know, some of the things that, you know, we'll want to consider, questions that we'll want to ask. And then again, what are some of the lessons if we do get to, you know, this phase 5 and the return to instruction? What are some of the things we learned from remote learning? what can we scale up? What should we stop doing? I mean, what are the things that we've done prior to this that really are obsolete and no longer necessary, and so forth. And then here's a draft of resources that I've been looking at, some other state plans, some of the stuff by CDC, the ISB Part 1, Part 2 guidance. Again, this is the Part 2 guidance that I mentioned to you that I think is a great resource that shares really a summary of all the, I'm sorry, this is the state board site. Clicked on the wrong one here. No, taking me the wrong link. I apologize. So just a few comprehensive resources that again have been impacting my thinking and the thinking of the SLT. So in a nutshell, that's where we're at. That's our process. We have a pretty good structure. I think when we meet at the end of June to talk about the strategic plan, we can also plan a date for, we'll know more about what's happening statewide, but we can also talk about the town hall meetings or the focus area groups that we want to run and work through this piece as well. So I'll save this for our next meeting in June, the strategic planning piece. Any questions about the reentry?
Well, I hope you share this, so don't forget, so we can look it over, all the pieces that you had to go over quickly because of a short period of time. I do think, though, that I know you shared that document with me for my SBE, and I thought you shared it with the whole board. And I think it was the one that is misattributed to that link that does talk about what the guidelines currently are about busing, about masks, about whether we supply them or someone else supplies them. And so there's a lot of really good information in that document. So when he forwards it, you'll want to take a look at it because I'm pretty sure that's the document.
Yeah, I think I did share it with you and SLT last weekend, now that you mention it, Janice.
Yeah.
Friday, June 5th at 2:07 p.m.
All right, cool. So you already have it. It's a nice document. It categorizes everything, puts it in the right place, and I think it's very useful.
Yes.
All right,
Doctor, I have one quick question. Are you seeing anything in the guidance in regards to actual testing by the district or having testing available in the event that staff member or student test positive?
I've not seen anything in the guidance indicating that school districts will have to do that. I don't know if any other SLT members have heard anything. Katie, have you heard anything from Denise Webster by any chance?
I have not heard anything about the responsibility they're laying on the school district.
There are guidelines, though, that say that if there's a fever of 100.4 or greater, that even if there is a fever, that those staff members have to leave right away. So they're doing
that is correct.
For students and for staff.
I'm sorry, I haven't had a chance to read the guidelines. But if we identify a student or staff that comes with a temperature that high, are we going to start the tracing process then too? And anybody that came in contact with maybe on the bus or something like that they would need to, we have to monitor those kids more closely, or is that going to be more of the the state that's going to be required to do
We haven't discussed it, but other school districts have. I know one of my colleagues is looking to hire someone who will do exactly, be a person that will oversee the COVID transition, but one of their roles will be some of the pieces connected to tracing. But we've not talked about that in District 59 yet, and there's nothing in any of the guidance that will require a district to do that. And I'm wondering what the health department role will be in that process. I'm thinking that would be something more along the lines that they would do.
I think so too. I mean, that has been their focus, and they're looking at hiring enough people to do the contact tracing for everybody that they identify as COVID positive. So I'm not sure that's something we should be doing when they should be getting those tests, and then the Department of Public Health will follow up.
Well, and this is Katie. I do just want to remind the group that yes, we would not permit people with a fever above 100.4 per those guidelines. But there are other screening questions that we also need to ask students and staff when they come into the buildings. And that fever may or may not indicate COVID. So there are other steps that would then happen after seeing that that fever is high that we would follow, and then potentially start the contact tracing process.
And I'm kind of more from the perspective that, there's a sibling, they're in the house with a sibling, in a different grade, stuff like that. Good possibly, once one sibling catches it, the other one could catch it as well. And that'd be, I don't know, it's how do we put that into our procedures and stuff like that, or what kind of guidance? I'm hoping they're going to give us some sort of guidance on that.
Well, there's strict. There's already strict guidance for all that from the health department. So the challenging part again is clearly communicating that with all of our stakeholders, our staff, but there are guidelines in place right now in the phase 3 that outline what that has to look like.
And I'm also curious too, in the worst case of scenarios of student in 3rd grade test positive for COVID, how is that communicated while respecting his rights as well as the privacy and his medical information, but also explaining it to the other parents in that classroom?
Yep, that's also regulated, and even we experienced some of those situations last year that we can't identify those people, and we can't give any communication that would allow that person or people to figure out who that person might be too. So all right, thank you. I'll turn it back over to Janice for the discussion 6.0.
Right, and that would be 6.0, 6.01, discussion of routers and battery pack replacement proposal. Hi, Ben.
Hey, how are you? So this is the time where we look at our E-rate cycle, and E-rate is the federal program that allows us to make purchases for telecommunications and internet access. So in this case, for this year, we're looking at a purchase of routers, switches, as well as battery backups. So the total cost to the district, if you see there, is $27,574.34. We will save $110,297 due to our 80% discount from E-rate. So these routers and switches will help with our infrastructure, our network, our security. The battery backups allow us about 3 to 6 hours of power on site if the power goes out. So that, is critically important for telephones, everything that when the network goes down, all those pieces are reliant upon the network access. So, so we had budgeted 30,000, so we're a little bit underneath that budget, which is great. And this is all part of our current budget and tech plan as well.
Any questions?
Yeah, quick question. Do we take advantages every year? Because I remember this from last year.
Yeah, so the way the cycle works, and we're in a gap year right now because E-rate is getting it's getting revamped, which will help us in some ways. But we typically will do this with our Comcast contract. So every year we get 80% off of our Comcast, which is a significant discount. And for equipment, we run in cycles. A district has so much money over a specified amount of years. So that's what they call the E-rate cycle. So then you can purchase so much network equipment. So this year we were up for the switches, the routers, and the battery backups. So some years we'll only see the discount applied and you won't necessarily see it. It'll be applied every year in our contract of our internet and network access. So when we redid our Comcast contract, this was part of that. And then that runs the duration of that contract.
And then there's one follow-up question. So if we approve this in July, this is in fiscal year 2021, these expenses then, correct?
Right, which is fine because this applies next year's E-rate. So this is now so the process can run through the application, which is why the timing does feel a little bit strange, but it's fine. If it gets approved in July, then we expend the funds next year, which is fine because that's part of next year's E-rate.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ben. So seeing none, let's move on to 6.02, discussion of 2020-2021 tentative budget long-term financial plan.
Dr. Fessler, can you go to the presentation slide, please?
I'm turning my video off because it helps to download and navigate the documents more quickly.
So good evening, everyone. This is the time of the year when we talk about the tentative budget for fiscal year 21. As we look at the process itself, Dr. Fessler, can you go to the next slide? What we have on the agenda tonight is the general review of the tentative budget, and then later we have the action item regarding authorizing staff to put the budget on display and set the date for the public hearing. You know, this is a moving process and it's very fluid. And again, you know, it's just the beginning part of it, and the budget is adopted in August. So August 10th is the date for the adoption. But as we get going, one of the things that I always like to review is, you know, what are our revenue sources? And later in the presentation, talk about what our expenses are. And obviously, we receive a majority of our taxes, revenue through property taxes. And this is one thing that we're looking at really carefully, and we'll go into more detail about that. But also under local, we have corporate personal property taxes, district fees, food service, donations, interest earnings. The state is a little bit more condensed in that now we have the evidence-based funding. We do have a competitive grant, the Preschool for All grant. We have categorical grants for transportation. And then we always look to see if there's any other state grant opportunities that we can apply for. And then federal, we have the ESSA grants. Those are all the title grants. IDEA for special education, Medicaid reimbursement. The meal program, that's for our free and reduced meal program. And then any other federal grants that may be coming available. Can you go back? I think you went one too many, Dr. Fessler. Nope, wrong way. Yep, thank you. So as we look at the revenue highlights, as I said, a majority of the revenue that we have comes from local resources, about 81%. And we receive the revenue locally from taxes in two actually levy years. We receive a portion of it in 19, and we receive a portion of 20. You know, as we talk about the 2019 levy receipts, we know that there has been some discussion whether or not there would be a delay in those revenue receipts, and you know, we need to plan accordingly. So we have had some conversations at a finance committee level regarding perhaps issuing a line of credit, looking at other alternatives to do some comparisons, whether or not we would need to call in any of our investments, you know, to cover some of our cash flow needs that those tax levy receipts would represent. But if you look at our 2019 tax levy receipts, if what our expected levy for 2019 does materialize, they would represent about $20 million that we would receive in September. And of that, we're anticipating that 55% of it, of the community members, property owners in Cook County may pay their taxes in a delay, because we're anticipating that 45% of those property owners that pay through escrow will pay on time. So when you even break it down further, then the amount of delayed tax receipts again is lessening. And we're continuing to work with our business partners to make sure that the district is in good financial standing from a cash flow perspective, to make sure that this doesn't have any impact on our financial obligations. But again, when you look at the fiscal year 21 budget, a majority of the tax levy receipts is going to come from the 2020 levy. And we know that for that levy year, CPI will be at 2.3%, and we're estimating a 1% increase in EAV. Again, this information will be updated as more information becomes available. As we look at our corporate personal property replacement taxes, we're not anticipating any increase in that line item. That represents about a little over $3 million in tax revenue, in corporate property replacement tax revenue to our budget. And for those of you that may not be familiar what that is, it's a revenue that's collected by the state of Illinois, paid to local governments to replace money that was lost when there was a change in the 1970 Constitution. And so companies pay into this, and then it's kind of like a flow through to the taxing districts. The continuation of instructional fees. These are the fees that were adopted back in December of 2019 for next year. For 20, we had a budget of 155,000, and right now we're anticipating that it'll even be a little bit greater than that for the fiscal year 20 actual budget versus actual. So we're anticipating at least 155,000 in 21 as a revenue source. And then interest earnings would remain flat. Obviously, we're not anticipating that we would see any increases based on the market. When we look at state funding, a big piece of it is through the evidence-based funding. With the passage of the BIMP bill in May, we're anticipating that budget is a hold harmless to School District 59. We are in tier 3, so we're anticipating no increases, that it will continue as it is in 20. And the other state and categorical grants, we're also keeping it flat. Even when we hear from other business partners, Frantic, that's having some revenue seminars and whatnot, they're anticipating from their sources that that's what we should be seeing at a state level. Obviously, the federal, we're keeping that flat at this point. Usually in the summer, we'll get more notification from the federal government regarding any of our awards for either the title grants, IDEA, things like that. So that may change from our tentative to final budget, but for the tentative budget, the federal revenue is flat. The other thing is the school construction grant. That is an award that we applied for this fiscal year. We have not received that money yet. That would be going into Fund 90, and we're just actually waiting to get that revenue for that grant.
Vicki, where do the CARE dollars fit in this equation?
The CARE dollars, we're anticipating that we would get it this year at the end of the year, because when it initially came out, they anticipated a 60-day return, 60-day turnaround time. We've already submitted the grant application, and we are finalizing our expenditure report to go out this week. So we're anticipating to get that grant money in this fiscal year, in fiscal year 20, not in fiscal year 21. Good. So as we look at the operating funds revenue, this just gives you a graphic representation for our operating funds and where our revenue sources are. This does not include any debt funding, capital project funding, or health, life, safety funding. Okay. Before we go on to expenses, are there any questions in regard to revenue? Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to expenses. Again, I wanted to review the different categories of the expenses. These are all objects that align to the state budget form 50-36, and they're just examples of different type of categories of expenses and where they would be budgeted. Obviously, salaries, we have our contracts, we have any increments, we have any overtime. For benefits, we'll have medical, dental, life, and retirement benefits. Purchase services, a lot of contracted services. It would be like transportation, food service, professional learning. Again, this is not an all-inclusive list, just to give you an example of some of those expense categories. For supplies, we've got the consumables, utilities, equipment, non-consumables over $500. Other under the other category would be tuition, like our out-of-district tuition, NSSEO, and fees. Now I'd like to talk about the expenses and the assumptions by fund that is built into the tentative budget. First of all, for staffing and salaries, obviously reflecting our classroom needs. It also reflects some retirement savings that we're anticipating in fiscal year 21. We are aware of 4 certified staff members that would be retiring at the end of this fiscal year, which has a cost savings in fiscal 21 of over $150,000. This does not, the tentative budget does not include any new hires for changes in programs. So it's not like additional programs will be, are anticipated to be added and that we would be supporting that with additional staff. When we look at benefits, we have 2 medical programs that our staff participated. The PPO program, we know that we have a 0% increase on that and a 1.6% increase for the HMO. For dental, 14.5% decrease. Our insurance and employee insurance and wellness committee really works hard at keeping these costs low and looking at our program itself to see, what we can do to curtail these costs. Life insurance is a 0% increase. TRS state is a 0% increase. And the TRS federal is a decrease of 0.25%. This TRS federal benefit is for those certified staff members that are paid for out of a federal grant. So the title grants, if there's a certified staff member that is paid out of there, or the IDEA grant, those salaries then have a TRS federal component to it. So in 21, that percentage will be 10.41%, which is a slight decrease from fiscal year 20. Continuing on, purchase services, we're going to see, and again, some of these numbers, again, they're assumptions right now. We know as we roll out different things with our reentry plan that there's going to be some changes, and so the tentative to the final budget would reflect that. But we're obviously increasing slight increase in the food service, which is an action item for tonight, later in the agenda. We're anticipating also a workers' compensation liability insurance increase. We are working with our carrier to finalize those numbers, but we are anticipating a somewhat large increase in our liability insurance. And so we're working with our broker to see what we can do to reduce that. The other purchase service line items will remain flat. In regard to supplies, Ben talked to some of this. In regard to the implementation of the technology management plan, if you look at the other documents that's attached to our agenda, it's page 10 in that document that gives a listing, an itemized listing of the tech plan and those projects moving forward. The supply item for fiscal year 21 also has the continuation of the supplemental instructional materials. Maureen has talked about that in her presentations regarding some of the supports that are in place and moving forward will be in place, and the financial support that is needed to continue supporting students. And then lastly, we do not have anything built into the budget regarding any legislative changes to public pension systems. So nothing out there for the pension shift. And so that includes the assumptions for the education fund. Moving forward for the operations and maintenance, again, no new positions to the O&M staff, yet we do have 2 positions that in the Cameo group that we have 2 maintenance people that will be retiring. We have 1 person retiring June 30th of this fiscal year, and then we have another maintenance staff member that is retiring November of 20 with an estimated cost savings of a little over $20,000. When we look at our benefits, the benefits are the same between the education fund and the O&M fund. So this again summarizes the the benefits. Obviously, there's nothing in there regarding TRS because this fund does not pay for any certified staff members for that are reported in this fund. For purchase services, again, the same. Two things in regard to workers' compensation and liability insurance. Anticipating a 3% increase for water, sewer, and then the other purchase service line items remain flat. Slight increase for gasoline and natural gas, and a decrease in electrical costs estimated to be $129,000 based on the new contract that we have for electric. Under equipment, we're continuing the cycle of replacement for our maintenance vehicles, and we're anticipating purchasing 2 more maintenance vehicles in fiscal year 21. And then when we talk about the capital improvements projects, for the operations and maintenance project, that equates to $233,000, a little over $233,000. And what I've done here is outlined the projects that are not health, life, safety. This is had been presented to the board earlier in the year, back in February, and I have adjusted it and also kind of given you an idea. I've given you an idea of where those projects are expended from. So if we'll go through it all, but obviously we're just talking right now about the operations and maintenance fund. The secured entrances was an approved project for Brentwood, Claremont, and Low. We will be doing some of the parts of the project in fiscal year 21, but then we will be completing it in fiscal year 22. In fiscal year 21, we'll be working at Claremont to do the abatement piece. That will be happening this summer and going out to bid for the projects in the fall of 20 and to begin those projects actually in June. So once school is done in June of 21, which is still fiscal year 21, we will begin those projects and we'll be incurring expenses to do those projects. So we're just estimating that we'll have 1/3 of it done in 21 and the balance done in 22. Art, can you go back to that other slide with the projects? Thank you. So if you look at the O&M fund, the capital projects is the HVAC projects, and then for O&M, you see the PA systems. That's again the replacement cycle for the PA system, security upgrades. Capital projects fund is going to have the pavement projects, and then the solar system project is on hold, if you will, because the funding expired for that. So it's going into multiple funds, all the projects that are going on in the district this year. Looking at transportation fund, salaries and benefits, again, for contract agreements, benefits the same as the other funds. When you go to purchase services, again, we have workers' compensation and liability insurance. It's charged to the 3 funds. And then back in December 9th, the board approved a 2-year extension on the transportation contracts with First Student in Grand Prairie with a 5% increase per fiscal year. We're anticipating an increase for gasoline, but there will be no bus purchases included in this budget. You know, we own the 2 small buses that transport a lot of our special ed students and our ELC students. Moving on to debt service. This budget includes the debt issues 14, 15, and 20. And 14 and 15 will retire in fiscal year 22. The 2020 debt issue will retire in 28. And it also includes a transfer of interest earnings to the education fund, which is something that we do on an annual basis. If you look at page 11 on the other document that's attached, you'll have an outline, a detailed outline of what the debt service payment, principal and interest by debt issue looks like. Social Security IMRF, the rate estimate is 13.3% that we received notification from IMRF on. This is based on our salaries, and it's also based on our staff members that retire through the IMRF retirement program. Working cash, transfer of interest earnings to operations and O&M fund, which is what we do normally as a part of the normal budgeting process. And it's also partial abatement of $420,000 to the capital improvement funds to pay for those projects that we talked about at the prior screen. Moving on to capital improvement funds. One too many art. Thank you. We have projects in the capital improvement funds of 1.8 million. One of the things that, one of the reasons why this is a little bit less than the projects themselves in 21 is that we did pay for those items that are being completed by CTS. We did pay in fiscal year 20 a 10% deposit, which is going to be reflected in both the capital improvements fund and the health life safety fund in 20. So obviously that lessens the amount that is budgeted for in 21. And then the health life safety fund is including all of the phase 1 projects with CTS or control technology and solutions. And as we look at the transfers, again, we talked about the transfers in summary. The transfers that are included in the tentative budget, we have working cash going to operations and maintenance. We have debt interest earnings going to the education fund. And then we have the partial abatement of working cash to the capital projects fund to offset those costs. And looking at the operational funds expenses, again, there's no surprise here. We have a majority of our expenses going to salaries and benefits, about 80%. So as we move forward, what's the bottom line? And what's our long-term plan? But before I get into that, are there any questions about any of the expense assumptions? Okay, moving on. So our long-term plan update, one of the things that we'll continue to look at is to monitor our key performance indicators, keeping abreast of emerging issues, including legislative issues, because that's going to be a big piece this year. Again, as I said, we're building into the tentative budget what we know right now. Yet we know with the reentry plan, we know with additional information that we're going to have over the summer that the tentative budget will be modified before it's presented as a final version to the Board of Education in August. And at that August meeting, that's when the board will get an update of a summary of all the things that have changed. And I'm thinking that this year it may be more than normal just because of the situation that we're at. But assuming that all of the assumptions that we've built into the budget remain true, we have really good news in the sense that for fiscal year 21, we have a surplus. Estimated surplus of almost $1.7 million. And again, you can look at this graph and other graphs starting on page in the book, but this graph in particular is on page 29 of the other document that's attached to the agenda. So, looking forward, we're meeting our goal of having a balanced budget. We're meeting our strategic goal of, allocating our resources to meet our goals, yet making sure that we're fiscally responsible. So this is really good news. Moving forward, obviously, all of the assumptions going forward are going to change. They do every year. But, we'll continue to look, for example, in fiscal year 22, at realizing that, we don't have a balanced budget at this point. But again, that's something that the team looks at every single year, all the budget managers, the SLT, to get to that goal and to have a surplus and then have the ability to use that surplus as the board determines.
Vicki, can I just make one comment? You can also see that the fund balance is on the bottom there. So FY 2020 end of year, we have a $94 million fund balance. I just want to clarify that when I started here as superintendent, we had roughly $110 million or just under $110 million fund balance. It only moved to 130 when we sold bonds to build the ELC, and that's when it increased. So I know that was mentioned earlier, but the reality is that we've got $94 million. We spent, nearly $17 million on this and other projects. So over the last 7 or 8 years, if you look at our historic spending, we have, as Vicki has said, been very fiscally responsible. We've deficit spent some years to meet some of our interests. Most of those were planned deficits. But I also want to point out that one of the interests the board shared earlier in the spring was to try to develop a surplus so we could, in the future, use those surplus dollars in our budget to pay for capital projects. So that was part of the goal in designing this budget. I would point out that 598,138 in the red for 2022 is attributed to, that's a refresh year for technology. So again, that's I don't know if that's $1.5 million, Vicki, or $1.7 million. I think you mentioned that at the.
Yeah, it's closer to 2 million.
So yeah, that explains that red mark right there. But we have the highest financial rating a district can have in the country. We have the highest financial rating by our state association and have had that for a significant number of years. So, Vicki has done an amazing job. She'll certainly be missed in retirement, and Ron has some big shoes to fill as he steps in. But again, just, want to congratulate Vicki for really being prudent and designing and developing goals that meet the interests of our students, support our students, but also in our newer budgets, really trying to address some of the needs we have for future capital projects.
So if I could ask a question, it's Courtney. I am wondering, Vicki, if you could shed some light on what is generating the close to $1.7 million surplus, because I know in just some of the narrative, it referenced the retirement incentives. It sounds like you said that the contract-based ones are about $150,000. And then there is, if I heard you right, like a cost savings of $20,000 for the operations and maintenance to folks who are retiring. I'm wondering what other cost savings are factored into that 1.7, and then what other factors are generating that surplus, just to give us a sense on the board of what might be in jeopardy, given that we're in a year that's especially variable, like how many of those factors that contribute to the surplus are variable?
I think I'm going to answer the question as a combined answer, and hopefully that answers your question. I think one of the huge pieces is the CPI at 2.3%. As we look at some of the items that when we work with our vendors, our business partners to keep our costs and our fees down, when medical have a 0% increase for medical for PPO and a 1.6, and the revenue, that pays for that is coming in at 2.3. That's huge. I mean, a majority of our costs are coming in at salaries and benefits. So when we look at, the amount of money that we spend is the employer portion of those benefits, that's a huge savings, or in the sense that we're getting more revenue than the expenses that we're incurring. It's not going up at the same level. Granted, we have some other vendors that are, our transportation costs are higher than the 2.3. Yet, for example, food service is 2.3. It's a flat. When you're having that flat piece, or when you're having the expenses actually remain flat, but the revenue is higher, I mean, that's where you're going to make up a big piece of your either deficit or surplus, in this case, surplus. And we really work very hard as a team, as budget managers, as the SLT team, when we're talking about like that, we're trying to not add anything to the budget.
work with our vendors, work, to be creative with the resources we have so that we're not adding to the budget. And when we start in the spring, in February and March, and I have one-on-one meetings with every single budget manager, and we go line by line on what we have planned, and we have those discussions of, well, maybe we can shift this to the grant and not use local resources. Those type of in-depth discussions so that we're continuing to provide the services and support that we need for the students, yet being very, very mindful of the impact that it has on the budget. Does that answer your question?
It does. I think the piece I would appreciate, maybe anything else you can offer, is what component, I mean, I don't know. I realize this is all like subject to unknowns at this point, but I guess I'm wondering, of that surplus, the 1.7 million, it sounds like a lot of different components of both the excellent CPI, right? The keeping the cost down, going line by line. But I guess I'm wondering how much of that 1.7 is subject to major variability, and maybe it's an unanswerable question, but if you have any insight, I'd be interested.
Well, when you look at the revenue side, the variable will be, in my mind, the timing of the payments, whether it be the state, the Fed, locally. I think that we'll get the payments, is how delayed will they be? So when you look at the revenue side, we know for a fact for the 2020 levy, CPI is going to be 2.3. That's not changing. That's a given. So with that, and that being our greatest revenue source, I'm pretty, I'm very confident that we would see that materialize. In regard to state funding, even though the BIMP bill's been passed, will we see a delay? Will we get that money, but maybe we'll get it in fiscal year 22? That's a possibility. I think historically federal funding sources have been on target and timely. So we should see our federal funding sources received in fiscal year 21 as planned. So probably our biggest variable will be the state funding and how delayed it would be. In regard to other things in regarding expenses, we do have contracts with our major vendors, and they're multi-year contracts. So we know what those expenses will be. The question will be whether or not we need to modify those contracts based on the current situation that we have. Do we need to go back to food service and modify it because we're doing another method of providing meals for students? That's a huge possibility. Do we have to go back to our transportation vendor and vendors, I should say, and figure out what we're going to do if we're going to start looping those routes, what the financial impact will be? Yes, I do think that are variables that definitely would impact the budget for 21.
Hey, Vicki, can you talk about what the impact? I mean, you were talking about some cost savings, and I suspect part of the question was, if we were in this place 2 years ago, why are we in this place now? Can you talk about the impact of the recent contract negotiation?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, that's a big piece, because there's actually two big pieces in. And, when you look forward in, where we thought we would be and where we are, I can tell you for sure, like when we're estimating for costs, we were thinking that we didn't know what the teacher contract would happen, or the Cameo contract. Those are the ones that are most recently settled. And, we realized we have a very fair teacher contract, but it took a lot of work to get to that point, and it did have a positive impact on the budget. In regard to like when we're forecasting and looking, say in 19, what 21 would look like, I can guarantee you I did not estimate CPI to be 2.3, much lower amount, because at that time that's where it was trending. But that's a positive thing that impacts the budget. Just like as you look at this document right now, I've said all along, you can look in your crystal ball, but it's going to change. what I have built in here is a 4-year average for CPI, you know, with everything that's going on. Is that right? Is that wrong? Only time will tell.
Thanks, Vicki.
Okay, Art, can you go to the next slide? One of the things that we always do, I think.
Vicki, I got a question. I'm sorry, I'm getting myself off mute. So if we look at that, the 1.7, does that include the 800,000 we're planning to spend for the capital projects and stuff like that? On a previous slide you sent us.
So if you look at the top of the slide, this is just our operation funds. So the educational, O&M, transportation, IMR, security, and working cash. It does not. But if you look in your other attachment, that does include reports on those funds starting on page, it's like the last 2 pages.
The last 3 pages, yeah. So that's about, and I see about $1.3 million search deficit then.
Just because the revenue was received in 20 and the expenditures are incurred, the majority of them in 21. It's the timing of when the revenue came in, because, for example, for like if you look at page 31 of that document, you'll see that, you know, we did get the revenue, the 30 million in 20, but then the expenditures are happening in 21.
I was more talking about the health life, the non-health life safety.
Right. So that's why we needed to transfer in that money, because we don't have a revenue source. That's what we have in the fund balance to begin with. We do not levy for the capital projects fund, so there's not that new revenue coming in to that fund. It's what we have in there already, plus the transfer of what we need to pay for those expenses for 21.
So you're looking at page 31 then. So the 31 is not are meant for health, life, safety only. I was talking about the 2.8 million you identified in the screen earlier, on a couple on a probably like page 9 or something like that. The 2.8 where we talk about the like the secured entrances and the asphalt and the PA projects.
So right, so that would be included in the, well, you know, it depends which projects you're talking about. On that screen, I identified which fund it was being charged to, because on that document, there was 233,000 charged to O&M. There was some of them.
Right. But there's, okay, I see. Okay, so I see that. So the capital projects, the 2 capital projects are not included in the 1.7, though. The surplus that we're showing for 2021 fiscal year, correct? We're planning to use reserves?
Yes, right. So we have money in that fund already, and then we need an additional 420,000 to cover the additional costs.
And that is coming out of the 1.7 then, correct?
That is a transfer from the working cash to the capital projects.
All right. Thank you.
Anything else before I go to the next slide? Okay. So one of the things that we look at when we present both the tentative and the final budget to the Board of Education is how are we doing as it relates to our fund balance policy. And I'm pleased to show that, you know, our trend is going in the right direction. You know, our final budget, we're estimating to be at 83%. Obviously, we don't have our estimated actuals at this point because we are in the midst of finalizing the fiscal year. In June, we do a bunch of payrolls that are then distributed over the summer for our 11-month employees. So we're booking a lot of stuff right now in June. So we don't have our estimated actuals. So this was the number that we had anticipated when the budget of the 20 budget was adopted to get us to the 83%. But then when we look at our tentative budget, as I said, the trend is going up, went up 6%. Again, you can look at this on that other document that is attached to the agenda on page 9. But, you know, our trends going the right way. And, you know, we're happy that we had gotten, worked very hard to get to this point. And I think that includes the tentative budget presentation. Are there any other questions?
Vicki, did we get that final payment from the old ad building, or is that coming this month?
It's coming this month. It's due next Monday, the 15th.
Thank you.
Vicki, I want to just thank you for your hard work over these years, recent years, to pull in the budget and figure out where we could get some significant cost savings to put us in a more permanent, healthy place as far as growing our reserves so that we will have the resources to pay for ongoing maintenance and maybe some capital projects. And I know it's taken a lot of effort on your part and the parts of everybody else that has budget responsibilities.
Thank you.
Okay, now I just wanted to diverge for a minute. I got a message from Lauren Zeich, who wanted me to read a statement on her behalf during public comments, even though it's time-stamped as coming in at 6 minutes before 7. It did not hit my inbox until after I was done because I checked and there were no additional statements. So what I'm going to do with this is forward it to the SLT and the BOE so that everybody sees what her concerns were about. And she's talking about the recent parent survey on e-learning, and she has some comments that she wanted to share. So I will be sending that out after the meeting. I just wanted to let you know. So with that said, let's move on with the consent agenda. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda? And please read the high-level titles of the items. Okay, I'll do it. I would like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes 7.01, approval of minutes of the prior meetings for May 11th, both regular and closed. 7.02, the disbursements resolution, listing for 2019-2020. 7.03, acceptance of financial reports. 7.04, acceptance of human resource recommendations. 7.05, approval to destroy 18-month-old or older closed session recordings. And 7.06, approval of the press 103 updates. Do we have a second?
Chris here, I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any items that anybody would like to have pulled?
This is Courtney. I'd like to pull the press 103 just for one question and one comment.
Okay, that's fine. So we have a motion then to approve 7.01 through 7.05. Roll call, please. We need you to unmute yourself.
Just did it, sorry. Krinsky.
Aye.
Garlowitz.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
And Schumacher. Mardell. And the motion passes.
Okay. All right, thank you. So let's move on to, where is it? 7.06, approval of press 103 updates. Courtney?
Yeah, thanks. So I just had two questions when I reviewed the policies and I wanted to share them with the board. I had one answer from Dr. Fessler, and then there's one that I don't know if Ben could weigh in on or Dr. Fessler, but the first one was on the policy change 2.16, which basically deleted a line about a concurrent conflict of interest for the board attorney. And I was just a little bit concerned about like why we were deleting that and thought perhaps it was just superfluous because the board attorney already has ethical obligations under like the state of Illinois and the ethics rules that govern their licensure. So Dr. Fessler did confirm that was the case. It's already an ethical obligation of the board attorney, so there's really no reason to state it in policy. So that's great. The other one I had a question about is 8.10, which is connection with the community and public relations. And it basically talks about community engagement initiatives for the following year and puts an obligation that objectives and a report be issued by the superintendent regarding those community engagement initiatives. And what I didn't really like is the press policy deleted or the superintendent's designee. Maybe that's not a big deal. I just didn't really understand like why that couldn't be delegated and why we would want to make it come from the superintendent. So I don't know if Ben had any comment on that or Dr. Fessler. It just seems to me we would want the flexibility to have it be delegable, but maybe there's a reason not to.
I agree with you. I think we should make it delegable.
Okay.
Okay, so if that's the case, we will then look for a motion to approve the Press 103 updates as amended. Would someone like to make that motion, Courtney?
I can make the motion, yeah. So I'm sorry, I don't have the particular motion, but I will do it. So whereas the Board of Education reviewed the following policy revision recommendations in the Illinois Association of School Boards Press Update 103 on 8th of June 2020. Those include the numbers listed. I guess I should read them all. 2125, 2160, 535, 550, 560, 5150, 5210, 5280, 6135, 6235, 6280, 770, 830, and 8110. We have a caveat to 810, which is that we're going to maintain the language about the superintendent or their designee. And whereas the Board of Education reviewed the following policies as part of the 5-year cycle that required no revisions on the 8th of June 2020 for 450, 7130, 7325, 880, therefore be it resolved that the CCSD59 Board of Education approves the recommended revisions to the CCSD59 Board of Education Policy Manual.
As amended.
As amended. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Where, Janice, where am I putting this?
What do you mean, where are you putting it?
Well, we already did the 7.
If you go to the agenda on 7.06, you can click on that. You can click on that and there's another. So you can use that format, but you'll probably have to transfer that to another document since you don't have, the piece of paper physically. So that's
right.
What I suggest.
Okay, I'm just wondering because we have a process that we sign the documents online now. So is that something Cindy's going to have to adjust?
Yeah, Cindy will do that right now. So as you take roll call, I'll have actually Cindy do it. She's in the room right next to me. She can do that and prepare that.
Perfect. Okay, so who's seconding?
This is Chris. I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Okay. Garlowitz.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli. Aye. Reed.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
And Krinsky.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
And there's Art. He's back.
Yep. I just checked with the boss. Cindy said that you actually have a separate copy in your packet. So if you look through your folder, you'll find a copy of that one too, Patty.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. We'll move on now to action items. Do we have someone who'd like to make the motion on 8.01 approval of taxi cab services?
I can do it. Where is it at? Whereas some proposals received for tax cap service rates for the years 2020-2021 school year, and whereas the district has stipulated not all services will be awarded to one company. Now therefore it be resolved that on the 8th day of June 2020, the Board of Education Community Consolidated School District 59 approves the following rates for taxi cab services. And see the listed.
Okay, second, this is Janice. Roll call, please.
Let's hang it. Okay. Lang.
Aye.
Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
Krinsky.
Aye.
And Garlowitz.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Oh, you're so good, man.
I'm getting there.
Still trying to train MSSEO. Julie keeps forgetting. Okay, let's see if someone would like to make a motion on 8.02, determination of serious safety hazards.
I'll do it. Be it resolved that on the 8th day of June 2020, Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education, in accordance with school code, determines the following areas as serious safety hazards in accordance with guidelines promulgated by the Illinois Department of Transportation, IDOT, in consultation with the Illinois State Board of Education, and the listing of all of the places on the back of this motion will be included in the motion that we're voting on.
I'll second Courtney.
Courtney. Okay. Who did I start with last time? Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
Krinsky. Krinsky.
I couldn't hear you. You broke up. Yes, aye.
Garlowitz.
Aye.
And Lang.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
All right, now we need a motion for 8.03.
This goes with this, goes with.
I can make the motion.
All right.
Courtney. Okay.
Discussion, I guess, do I need to include the background? I think I do. Discussion of the tentative 20, no? Okay.
Oh, just the recommendation.
Right.
Okay, sorry, I was missing. Resolved that on the 8th day of June 2020, the CCSD 59 Board of Education resolves that the fiscal year for CCSD 59 Cook County, Illinois be and hereby is established as commencing July 1st, 2020 and ending June 30th, 2021. Be it further resolved that the public hearing on the tentative budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020 be set for 7 p.m. Monday, August 3rd, 2020 at the Administration Center, 1001 Leicester Road, Elk Grove Village, Illinois, and that proper notice of said hearing and of the availability of the budget for public inspection be given by the Secretary of this Board of Education by publishing notice thereof at least 30 days prior to August 3rd, 2020 in the Journal on Topics, a newspaper published in this district, which notice shall be substantially in the form as indicated in the resolution.
I'll second it.
Who's seconding?
Mardell.
All right. Petrielli, aye. Oh, yeah, I did, Robert. Okay. Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
Krinsky.
Aye.
Garlowitz.
Aye.
And Lang.
Aye.
And Mencia.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
All right. Let's do a motion on 8.04, appointment of school treasurer.
I'll do this one.
All right.
Whereas the board is required to appoint a school treasurer effective July 1st, 2020. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District number 59, Cook County, Illinois, as follows. Section 1, the board incorporates the foregoing paragraphs of this resolution as if fully set forth herein. Section 2, the board hereby appoints Assistant Superintendent for Business Services / CSBO Ronald O'Connor as school treasurer.
Robert, you're breaking up. Can you speak more directly?
There we go. I'll start over. Section 2, the board hereby appoints Assistant Superintendent for Business Services / CSBO Ronald O'Connor as school treasurer effective July 1st, 2020. Section 3, commencing with the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020, The board shall appoint a school treasurer in accordance with section 5/81C of the Illinois School Code. Section 4, this resolution shall be in full force and effect upon its passage.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second. Patty.
Okay, roll call, Patty.
Okay, let's see, where are we at? Reed.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
Krinsky.
Aye.
Garlowitz.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia.
Aye.
And Petrielli, aye, and the motion passes.
All right, I'm going to make the next motion, 8.05. Whereas the board is required to approve the school treasurer's bond, now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 59 in Cook County, Illinois, as documented in the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Okay. Schumacher.
Aye.
Krinsky.
Aye.
Garlowitz.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli, aye, and Reed.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Great. Looks like Robert dropped off, but otherwise, I mean Ron, but otherwise we tell him he's officially now bonded. Okay, let's see. What's the next item?
06.
Yeah, sorry.
8.06.
Right. Approval of abatement of working cash fund. Who'd like to make the motion?
I can do it. It's Randy.
Randy.
Okay.
Whereas the Board of Education, Community Consolidated School District 59, Cook County, Illinois, has therefore created and established a working cash fund in and for the district, and whereas the board has determined and does hereby determine that it is necessary and in the best interest of the district that the working cash fund be partially abated and the amount abated be transferred to the operations and maintenance fund. And whereas section 20-10 of the Illinois School Code authorizes the board to abate the working cash fund at any time to make subject transfer to the fund most in need, provided the district maintains an amount to the credit of the working cash fund, including taxes levied but not yet collected, equal to or greater than 0.05% of the equalized value, assessed value of the taxable property in the district. Now, therefore, resolved by the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 59, Cook County, Illinois, as follows. Section 1. How about as listed? Can I say as listed?
Yeah, that's great. Do we have a second?
I'll second that one. It's Robert.
Robert, thank you.
All right. Roll call, please.
Krinsky.
Aye.
Garlowitz.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
All right. Do we have a motion for 8.07?
Courtney, I can make the motion. Whereas it is the intent of the Board of Education to transfer on an annual basis 100% of the interest recorded from investments in the debt service fund. And whereas section 10-22.44 of the school code provides the Board of Education of the district has the power to transfer interest earned from the investment of monies in the debt service fund to the respective fund of the district that is most in need of such interest income as determined by the Board of Education. And whereas it is hereby found and determined by the Board of Education that the educational fund is most in need of the interest income recorded from the investment of monies of the school districts in the debt service fund. And whereas it is in the best interest of the district that the Board of Education direct the school treasurer to transfer 100% of said interest income to the educational fund. And whereas the 2019-2020 interest income from the debt service fund has not been earmarked or restricted by the Board of Education for any designated purpose, be it resolved that on the 8th day of June 2020, the CCSD59 Board of Education adopts the information in the three sections that follow.
All right. I'll second it. That's Janice. Roll call, please.
Okay. Where are we? Garlowitz.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
And Krinsky.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Okay. Do we have someone that'll make the motion for 8.08?
Hang on, let's see here.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Robert?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Whereas the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District number 59, Cook County, Illinois, has heretofore created and established a working cash fund in and for the district. And whereas Section 20-5 of the Illinois School Code provides that monies earned as interest from the investment of the working cash fund or any portion thereof may be permanently transferred from the working cash fund to another fund of the district that is most in need of the interest. And the 2019-2020 interest income from the working cash fund has not been earmarked or restricted by the Board of Education for any designated purpose. And whereas the Board of Education hereby determines that the Operations and Maintenance Fund is the fund that is most in need of the interest income from the working cash fund, and whereas the Board of Education has determined that it is in the best interest of the district that 100% of the 2019-2020 interest income from the working cash fund be transferred to the Operations and Maintenance Fund. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District number 59, Cook County, Illinois, as follows, as the three sections set forth in this motion.
Okay, do we have a second?
This is Randy. I can second it.
All right, roll call.
I'd like to ask a question.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure that I approve of the idea of putting 100% of the interest from the working cash fund into O&M. I would prefer that we budget for O&M as needed and try to keep some of the money that comes from the working cash fund there for emergencies. That's what how the original working cash fund was set up, because the district was in such bad shape that we had to pay our teachers in script. This was before I was on the board. And so we had some excellent financial people in our district who started the working cash fund to get us going. I'd like to keep as much money as we might need for emergencies in the working cash fund, so we don't get into a situation like we did last year where we were so in need of money. And I certainly don't want us to ever get into that kind of situation again. We've got to budget carefully. We've got to be sure that there's enough revenue coming in to handle whatever we decide to do, and not have to always worry about taking the interest out of the working cash fund to get us through the year. So that's just my thought on it. I may vote against it because of that.
Mardell, this is Randy. All those funds are combined in our total reporting anyways. So whether we transfer the funds or we don't transfer funds, they're still part of our overall budget.
Mardell, just to confirm, this is just a formality to implement the what was already adopted by the Board of Education in August as a plan. So this is for fiscal year 20. Again, it's the formality to give us authorization to do the transfer, which was approved by the Board of Education back in August when the fiscal year 20 budget was adopted.
I understand that, but I'm trying to say that I think we should be more involved in budgeting what we actually can and need, and not budgeting on the interest from another fund. I just don't like that type of tit for tat type thing. And the working cash fund is such an important fund to have for emergencies that I don't want to deplete it any more than is necessary. You can go ahead and vote for it, that's fine, but I'm telling you that's why I'm not going to vote for it.
Mardell, thank you for your input. Let's do roll call, please.
Okay, Lang.
Aye.
Mancia?
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed?
Aye.
Schumacher?
No.
Krinsky?
Aye.
And Garlowitz?
Aye.
And the motion passes.
All right, thank you. Let's move on now to the 8.09, approval of student meal fees.
I'll do it. Be it resolved that on the 8th day of June 2020, Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Ed establishes the student per meal fees for the 2020-2021 school year as follows. Full price lunch, $3.05. Full price breakfast, $1.30. Reduced price lunch, currently 40 cents in accordance with federal guidelines. Reduced price breakfast, currently 30 cents in accordance with federal guidelines. And a carton of milk price 50 cents.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second. Patty.
Okay, roll call, please.
Okay. Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli. Aye. Reed. Reed.
Hold on. I'm good. Can I get muted?
I got you. Schumacher.
Aye.
Grinsky.
Aye.
Garlowitz.
Aye.
And Lane.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Okay, do we have a motion for 8.10?
8.10. This is the, oh.
This is Chris. I'll take it. Be it resolved that on the 8th day of June 2020, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education renew the contract with Organic Life, 430 West Erie Street, Suite 403, Chicago, Illinois, to provide meals for the 2020-2021 school year at the following rates as detailed in the motion.
Do we have a second?
Courtney will second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Courtney. Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
Krinsky.
Aye.
Garlowitz.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Okay, I'm going to make the next motion. It's the adoption of STEM Scope Science Program as a lover of science. So whereas the Board of Education reviewed the STEM Scopes Science Program recommendation by the Science Subcommittee Pilot Committee on the 8th day of June 2020, be it resolved that on the 8th day of June 2020, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education adopt STEM Scope Science Program in grades K through 8 for the 2021 school year as presented.
I will second.
All right.
Just a quick comment on this one that I would like to get on the record to say that I'm happy to say that my alma mater, Rice University, is where this curriculum came out of, but I am still going to vote because I have no financial interest in them per se directly. And I didn't even realize that was the case until like reviewing it in detail before tonight. So I'm excited about this program. Only further comment.
Wow, that's great. Me too. I should have said that the total amount is $100,240. Roll call, please.
Okay, Reed.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
Krinsky.
Aye.
Garlowitz.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli. Aye, and the motion passes.
All
Yes,
right.
we have science curriculum.
Woo! Okay, 8.12. Would someone make a motion,
Take
please?
that one. Be
This
it
is Randy. I
resolved
can.
on the 8th
Oh, do you want it, Courtney?
Who's doing it?
I can
I'll
do it.
fight over it. Who's doing it?
Ardell.
Okay, be it resolved that on the 8th day of June 2020, Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education approves the donation from the District 59 Education Foundation in the amount of $10,783. This donation will be used to support families during the COVID-19 pandemic. Be it further resolved, the superintendent shall communicate to the District 59 Education Foundation in writing, expressing the appreciation of the members of the Board of Education, and that this donation shall be listed in the official minutes of this meeting.
All right, do we have a second?
Courtney will second.
All right, roll call, please.
Courtney, hang it. Let me write Courtney down. Who am I on? Schumacher.
Aye.
Krinsky.
Aye.
Garlowitz.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli. Aye. Reed.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Great. Okay. I just wanted to say as an aside, Katie, if you run out of money, would you let us know so we can see what we can do about it?
Where is
I
Kate?
will. We're doing great right now, though.
Oh, there she is.
Good. Okay. Well, you got a lot of families you're feeding. Okay. Do we have a motion on 8.13?
This is Randy. I can do it.
Okay, Randy.
Whereas members of the Board of Education have completed a review of compensation to be provided for administration and non-negotiated personnel for the 2021 fiscal year. Therefore, resolved on the 8th day of June 2020 that the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education authorized a compensation pool of 2.3% for administrative and non-negotiated staff.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Mardell.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Okay, let's see, where am I? Krinsky.
Aye.
Garlowitz.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
All right, that's great. Now we go on to special interest topics, 9.01 FOIA requests.
Good evening. We have had 4 FOIA requests since the last report to the Board of Education. All of them have been responded to appropriately.
Okay, thank you. I know
You're
you
welcome.
waited all night to say that.
Very exciting.
What did you say? All of them are what?
They've all been responded to appropriately.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, who's on 9.02 annual debt disclosure compliance?
That would be Vicki.
Yeah.
Annually, we just report to the Board of Education information regarding our debt situation. This year, we have updated it to include 2020 information. We work with our partner, Elizabeth Hennessy, with, who is our bond consultant, if you will, to make sure that all that compliance issues are being met. Again, it's just an informational item for the Board of Education.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to 10.0, new and continuing business and announcements. Given how late it is, unless you have something really pressing to say under committee reports, I'd like to just skip that and keep moving.
I just want to say something about the facilities. On the weekly update, Albert and Vicky are doing a great job keeping everybody up to date with the projects that are going on. So every week that'll be updated for the weekly update. So if you got any questions, look that over. And if you got any questions from that, just go ahead and send them right to Vicky and Albert.
Okay, thank you. All right, same with 11.0. Unless you have something really compelling as a report of the Board of Education, I'd rather dispense with that. There is one item that came up that we do need to handle. I don't want to do it right now, but I want to give you a heads up. There was some discussion at the Communications Committee meeting about making some community members official members of the committees. And in talking with Dr. Fessler, he would like to have an opportunity. He thinks that the board should vet the people who have applied for that honor, and that we should do something similar to selecting new board members and then appoint them. So I just wanted to let you know that that's out there. We'll have to deal with it at some later point.
Sounds good.
Okay, any other reports that can't wait?
I just want to add one thing. Janice and I and Courtney kind of put a letter together because we had a lot of donors coming up that are help supporting the district. So Cindy emailed some letters out today. So some of the donors that we've been receiving food supplies, gift cards, and other stuff from us.
Oh, nice.
And it came from all of us from the district.
Right, they went directly to the district instead of going through the foundation. So it was signed both from the board and from Dr. Fessler. So thank you, Randy, for putting that together.
Randy.
Yeah, Randy. Thumbs up. Okay, report to the superintendent's team. Is there any additional information you'd like to share?
We've shared all that we have to share for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, that sounds good. All right. So now we need to have a motion to go into closed session.
Like me to do it?
Sure.
Privilege. Be it resolved that on the 8th day of June 2020, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education recess in a closed meeting for discussion of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district, 5 ILCS 120/2C1.
Okay, do we have a second?
Robert will second it.
Oh, Robert?
Yes.
Okay.
Roll call, please.
Okay. Where am I? Garlowitz.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Mancia.
Aye.
Petrielli. Aye. Reed.
Aye.
Schumacher.
Aye.
And Krinsky.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Okay, so let's take a quick 5